1987 was a big year for video games. The previous year was hard to ignore, seeing the likes of Super Mario Bros., Castlevania, Metroid, Outrun, and The Legend of Zelda, to name a few. But 1987 kept the burgeoning industry of video games alive and well. In a phrase, it was the year of future classics. Up-and-comers like Metal Gear, Double Dragon, Mega Man, Shinobi, and Street Fighter would all enter the ring for the first time. Castlevania, Zelda, and Dragon Quest all received sequels that turned standalone games into franchised household names. But it wasn't just a big year for games from all walks of play. 1987 was a big year for role-playing games specifically. In addition to Dragon Quest II, you had Phantasy Star and Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei, which had box art that looked like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. JoJo's debuted a month later, so I'm not surprised. In 1987, you also had Final Fantasy, which released less than 2 months before the critically acclaimed Dragon Quest III. All of these titles would eventually make it over to the West and be celebrated. Fervent players wouldn't only commit the names of these series to memory, they would also learn about their publishers. Joining the likes of Atari, Sega, and Nintendo would be names like Square, Konami, Capcom, Tecmo, and Enix. Of course, we're talking primarily about games and publishers that were either in the arcades of yore or on home consoles, the two primary mediums for playing notable games in the West back then. Before they were a self-proclaimed master race, PC owners had a bit of a hard time sharing their gaming experiences with their fellow appreciators. With a higher financial barrier to entry, gaming on a personal computer was not as widely talked about in the common circles of interest. And if one publisher was making waves on the PC while not really being talked about outside of Japan in the mid to late 80s, that company was Nihon Falcom. Named after a combination of the Japanese word for Japan, or Nihon, and half of the name of the popular spacecraft from Star Wars, replacing the letter N with the letter M, because it sounded more techy. Nihon Falcom was a force to be reckoned with in the computer game scene in its country of origin. The company began in 1981 when a Hino Motors employee, Masayuki Kato, who learned how to make computer programs for his son in his spare time, decided to open a shop called Computerland Tachikawa after quitting and acquiring enough capital for freelance work to make it happen. Computerland was quintessential brick and mortar, run only by Kato and his wife, with some part-time workers added into the mix. In addition to other commodities, the small business sold Apple hardware and software. But what made the business stand out was that it had a space reserved for potential buyers to test its products. Patrons were allowed to do work on display computers. Couches were laid out for people to relax and hang, and Kato would offer free coffee to his patrons. Computerland Tachikawa oozed comfort, and the market returned its goodwill in kind. The business's ambiance attracted hobbyist programmers, and I think you have enough information to see how we get from computer vendor to game development studio. You might think this was an odd way for a developer to get its wheels in motion, but hey, if Squaresoft could get its start operating out of a hair salon next to a university with the goal of luring computer programming students, the mom-and-pop computer complimentary coffee shop sounds pretty normal. That's a story for another time. In the prosperous era that was Japan in the 1980s, you've got to start somewhere, and there was no time like the present. One such hobbyist programmer who frequented the shop was Yoshio Kiya. Kiya was a car mechanic by trade. He would visit Computerland with oil-stained hands, which sounds bad for business both on paper and in practice, especially for a vendor who displayed hardware that should not have motor oil on it, unless that vendor was owned by a dude who worked for a car company for 12 years who's also something of a hobbyist programmer himself. In this case, that's two commonalities and a shared interest closer toward being a lucrative business venture. I'm sure that Masayuki Kato and Yoshio Kiya bonded near instantaneously. Factor in that Yoshio Kiya would barter his self-made software for Computerland's hardware, and then Kiya's software would be sold on store shelves, and suddenly, you've got a low-risk, low-cost investment with potentially logarithmic returns. You could call it an unlikely business relationship, I call it unintended alliteration. Reality made it an unexpected windfall. Galactic Wars was Falcom's first Kiya-made game, and at one point in time, the company boasted, and I'm paraphrasing here, "This game is selling so well, we hope to sell 10,000 copies." Fast forward 2 years, some hobbyist programmers turned employees, and 10 games later, including Private Stripper, What a Name, Panorama Toe, Demon's Ring, and Azteca, and Falcom helped foster Yoshio Kiya's Dragon Slayer, which became akin to a digital mission statement for the games that followed it. Dragon Slayer's sequel, Xanadu, Dragon Slayer 2, which arrived in 1985, ended up selling 400,000 copies. Considering that this happened before both Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, these numbers were unprecedented at the time. Xanadu became and maintained its throne as the best-selling PC game of all time for decades, plural. Reflecting on these sales numbers in an interview, Masayuki Kato speculated that, including pirated copies, the number of people who played Xanadu was much higher when you included any gamer who owned a personal computer in Japan. It was safe to say that a dynamic like Kato and Kia's yielded a logarithmic return on its investment, and in the country of Japan, it was a guarantee that a topic like computer games would forever be associated with a developer like Falcom. For better and for worse, Xanadu had grown Falcom's status to worldwide acclaim. And not just because the game was great. Xanadu's logo was intentionally designed for commercial distribution so that, if it sold well, it could be used to amplify the future sales of merchandise. Lightning struck twice, and the merchandise was on the rise. There was a Xanadu manga, a Xanadu anime. I actually watched the anime a bit because I theorized that the urchin-looking thing here was an inspiration for Chrono Trigger's big bad, Lavos. I don't know. You tell me. I promise that's the least pleasant you'll ever feel watching this video, if ever, because I hate that noise with the fire of 1,000 suns. Anyway, the anime was pretty rad. A Xanadu board game, Xanadu stickers. Dear Lord, I want a Xanadu shirt. You're listening to the Xanadu anthem right now. Okay, on to the worst part. Falcom approached Ultima famed Origin Systems for a distribution deal. The deal entailed that each developer would port and localize each other's games, exchange royalties, and further their dominions beyond their respective kingdoms of influence. It all sounded promising, and Richard Garriott flew out to Japan to see a demonstration of Xanadu, break bread, and hopefully pop some champagne. The meeting never made it past Xanadu's demo. During the game's presentation, Garriott noticed that Xanadu's character portraits were supplanted colored images from Ultima 3's game manual. At best, they were cheap, near-accurate imitations. At worst, they were plagiarized artwork. Once Garriott saw the second heavily inspired image, he abruptly ended the meeting, stood up from his seat, and with the point of an index finger, yelled, "Shame on you, Xanadu!" And he walked out of Falcom with his nose facing the sky and his eyes closed in true Lord British fashion. Just kidding. He threatened to sue, he did sue, and it was settled out of court. For shame indeed. The opportunity to work with Origin could have established Falcom's presence in the West in a huge way, most likely leading to other ventures. But sadly, that was not Falcom's lot in international business. To make matters worse for Falcom's notoriety, Masayuki Kato had a conservative business acumen, sticking to what he knew while remaining allergic to innovation. Some consoles like the Nintendo Entertainment and Sega Master Systems were on the rise in the mid-80s, and they utilized cartridges for game storage instead of discs. So, Kato considered reformatting disc games to cartridges a regression in business. It was the right feeling, albeit with devastatingly wrong timing. CD-ROMs were the future of the industry, even if Falcom was a decade early. I'm certain that Xanadu's success in Japan only strengthened Kato's conviction that porting games to cartridges was a mistake to be avoided. And if I know anything about Japan in the 1980s from my time spent in Korea in 2010, the land of the rising sun was always a full calendar day ahead by virtue of where the sun decided to rise in the Earth's curvature, and at least a decade ahead of the West in terms of common technological infrastructure. So, if you've ever wondered what the East series is, and why it's never discussed in the same vein as the great franchises that came up alongside it, here's my best answer. Lack of accessibility. East was a game that was strictly bound to CD-ROMs in the late 80s, with one exception, the Sega Master System. Its sequel, East 2, would never see the light of day on the console. I'm sure that in Kato's mind, due to not being as widely received as Xanadu was in Japan for the PC, the East series should have remained on Falcom's platform of choice, the PC-88. But personal computers were not the gaming platform of choice in the West like they were in Japan. Consoles were. And the reality of the situation is that the NES eclipsed its competitors in console sales everywhere. To make matters more harrowing for the East series, East 1 and 2 were bundled for the TurboGrafx CD, a premium expansion released for the TurboGrafx 16, the Western counterpart to Japan's PC Engine. The TurboGrafx was released 2 years after it arrived in the East, which, if inflation adjusted to the 6 to 8 years of development time it takes to make a AAA game today, was a boat-missing amount of time for a series to catch fire back then. Even in the best of scenarios, around 2.75 million combined Sega Master Systems and TurboGrafx 16s were sold in the West by 1992. Compare that to the 30 million NES consoles sold in the US by 1991, and now you can begin to understand why we don't discuss Falcom as much as Square, Enix, or Atlas. Or when we talk about a series like Zelda, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, or Persona, Ys is unfortunately left out. I'm here to change that perspective. The first Ys released for the PC-88 on June 21st, 1987. The power couple behind the game was the previous game designer of Azteca, Masaya Hashimoto, and scenario writer Tomoyoshi Miyazaki. Speaking shallowly, the name Miyazaki should already sell you on this game. I have yet to see a dude with that last name not exhaust transcendental art. Like most of the talent at Falcom at the time, these guys were young, as in still in college young. Miyazaki only worked at Falcom part-time while attending university to give you some perspective. I could share more about these two, but I think that you'll find their game design and narrative structure can reveal just how monumental they were for a project like Ys. What I can tell you is that both Ys 1 and 2 were meant to be a singular experience, but Hashimoto and Miyazaki eventually decided to split the game like Irish twins, with Ys 2 arriving on April 22nd, 1988. But now you know why the first two games are frequently lumped together when they're discussed. Today, Ys is a series spanning 10 entries with supplementary literature following the in-world recovered archives of one Adol Kristen, a farm boy turned adventurer at the age of 16 who died at the age of 63. According to the lore, a collection of over 100 volumes of a travelogue were found in the family storeroom of Adol's family estate that date back centuries, if not an entire millennium, after their discovery. Each journal chronicles an adventure that Adol engaged in throughout the continent of Eurasia, which phonetically may as well be an abbreviation for the word Eurasia. Adol was born in the backwater town located in the northeast corner of the Europa region of the continent. By now I'm sure you can guess that Adol's world is a mirror to ours in terms of the broad geography. When I'm told that his adventures spanned from the center of Africa to as far as the river Tigris, I don't need to pull out a real-world map to know exactly where he is in this fictional world. Similarly, I can chuckle when I see countries like Greek and Roman next to each other. Even units of measurement are spelled differently, but I think I know meters and kilometers when I see them. Outside of a scant few details, we, the avid reading gamers, only know that Adol visited a lot of places, chronicled each adventure, and presumably died while on a voyage to his world's version of the North Pole. It's also called the North Pole. Go figure. All of this can be found in Ys 1's game manual, which, seeing as I'm a 90s kid, I greatly appreciate. Considering only its early entries, the Ys series suffers from a case of it's all in the manual syndrome, a common affliction for games of the time that allowed for them to greatly elaborate on their worlds without sacrificing the manpower needed to make it appear on a screen. This thing is 27 pages long, practically a novella. I read it all. I love it, but what an excellent setup for the series as a whole. I don't discuss it too much, but Zelda is a good comparison to make when talking about the Ys series. Where a series like Zelda shares its continuity with different reincarnations of the same hero, spanning across centuries and millennia in the same land, Ys focuses on one guy adventuring give or take 50 years of his life in a world much like ours. Adol Kristen is basically Himmel the hero, but with red hair. You'll see with later entries that Adol's journeys release in chronological order but blip in and out of its own timeline whenever its creators deem necessary. For example, Ys 3 takes place after Ys 4, because Ys 4 underwent some developmental issues but was later revitalized and retroactively connected. It's a whole ordeal. When relating to the games, the name Ys is what's known as an artifact title. It's a title that was decided when the first game was made, while not expecting the series to necessarily take off among gamers. Think of Final Fantasy or Fire Emblem, for example. The most recent Final Fantasy, God willing, will not be the last one, and each Fire Emblem game manages to shoehorn its eponymous MacGuffin regardless of its setting. Similarly, the Land of Ys is only relevant in terms of its first two games, and an entry that was released almost 2 decades later, outside of being a place that Adol reminisces about from time to time in the adventures that follow these games. Adol is the guy who saved Asteria, which is a land entrenched in mystery up until the completion of Ys 2. For some real-world parallelism, Ys is an ancient city of French legend. It's a mythical no-place of a caliber similar to Atlantis or El Dorado. You've heard legends about these places. Maybe you've read about them. No one's ever seen them with their own eyes, but they were said to be magical. Let's find us some magic. For the purposes of this video, we're going to cover the remakes from the PSP that were released on Steam. Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles Plus. The Chronicles Plus version has a new starting town that was mentioned in the original game's manual, Barbado. Additionally, it has updated graphics, improved battle mechanics, character art, as well as new arrangements to the original music. It does lack certain aspects that other versions of these games flesh out better, but all in all, I think it provides a more satisfying experience. So, without further ado, let's dive into Ys Book 1. Well, they say you should never judge a book by its cover, but you should definitely judge Ys 1 by its title screen and intro music. A young blue-haired woman fades into view as your ears are greeted by an angelic choir. We did not have to search long or far to find the magic, my friends. The music is enticing. It has a fairy tale quality to it. Like a gilded book cover, it begs you to open its pages and begin whatever fantasy lies in store for the hero of this fable. The woodwinds and string instruments harmonize in a pensive tone as the orb in front of the woman's hand swirls, almost conjuring your mind's thoughts to contemplate what awaits you on the journey you have yet to depart on. I'll save you the 5 minutes I spent getting introspective before starting a game I've heard nothing but good things about. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm sold on the splendid audio. After pressing the start button, the tone continues, but with the delivery of a lazy harmonica. I'm not gonna lie, all I can think about is episode 6 of Cowboy Bebop at this point. We witness who the harmonica belongs to. Another blue-haired woman atop fortress ramparts with snow-white levels of avian attraction. The camera veers off in the direction she's facing as the music increases in grandeur scale to show us a tall tower as it moves upward to a landmass hidden by a combination of clouds and reflective sunlight. The scene cuts before we can get a good enough look at what the FMV wants to show us. We see books surrounded by dusty sunlight, a monolithic temple with sages in it. We discover that the blue-haired women are twins, so that's relevant to me personally. The crystal ball starts spawning demons like a visual metaphor should in any JRPG. And most importantly, we see twin moons, which I consider to be a good omen. If there's one thing I know for certain about RPGs, it's that only the best RPGs have 2 moons. The important takeaway from all of this is that Adol is foolishly sailing toward the tower that caught his eye in the manual's prologue before the situation turns Link's awakening. After all, you can't have an Odyssey without a little danger. Like most RPGs, we wake up in a bed. Unlike most RPGs, that bed is inside of a hospital. It's not one of those every day was the same until one day type of scenarios. Congratulations! You're now marooned on this island, and it's time to get to the bottom of things. We feel like a stranger in a strange land, and I'm here for it. It's neat to see some ludonarrative harmony, with Adol's HP meter being more than halfway depleted. Details like that really sell me on a game's immersion, which this game carries in spades. We meet Dr. Bluto, and his son Slav. It just so happens that Slav was out on patrol when he found Adol getting attacked by rebels. Here's a picture from the manual, but I'd be lying if I said my mind didn't immediately visualize Adol getting the Ashitaka treatment. Barely 2 minutes into this game and there's a reference to Maneater by Hall & Oates. I know it's not part of the original game, but Xseed, the localization team who worked on this version, was trying to contextualize this remake back to when it was made, and unlike Adol, I sometimes make my way back home to a Sunday family meal that always begins with my dad saying, "Hey Alexa, play Yacht Rock Radio," from time to time, so the illusion is not lost on me. And if you're listening to this video near her, you're welcome. I only noticed about 3 more pop culture references throughout both games, including the classic Star Wars You're My Only Hope, which was basically a moral obligation for a developer named Nihon Falcom, and a reference from The Shining with the father and son duo Torrance and Danny, which in hindsight convinces me that this is going to be a foreshadowing by way of localization from Xseed. I'm anticipating a Here's Johnny at some point. Anyway, we're told to go find Slav, but we pretty much have free reign to do whatever we want now. This is the town of Barbado. It's nice and friendly here if you can look past the monster-damaged fortifications. The tavern is as destitute of patronage as small towns go, and the pen is full of pickards, or capybara-sized hamsters. When Falcom first advertised Ys in a magazine, its slogan declared, "Now it's the era to bring kindness into RPGs." And I think that this is an important statement to keep in mind as you play through the series. There's an immense amount of setup for Ys's story as you talk to each villager, which you will certainly want to do. But also, going into an RPG and not partaking in dialogue is like skimming through a 500-page book and being upset that there aren't any pictures. We learn that Barbado developed from a small fishing hamlet into a bustling port town overnight from the discovery of silver. Trading the precious metal became a watershed industry for the land of Asteria, and all of the action was happening at Barbado. That was until about 6 months ago when some regular trade ships carrying silver were instantly swallowed by an island-surrounding tempest that appeared out of nowhere, and has surrounded the land ever since. This phenomenon was dubbed the Storm Wall, the same force of nature that wrecked Adol's ship, nearly killing him in the process when he first set out on his adventure. Since his arrival, Adol is the only traveler who has made it past the Storm Wall without perishing. Some of Barbado's residents are stranded merchants from other lands. The town has a palisade and a 24-hour garrison protecting it from demons, which appeared at the same time as the Storm Wall. We'll also hear about 2 other locations we'll find in Asteria, but the one that looms large over Adol's quest is Darm Tower. the mysterious structure that extends into the heavens. Seeing the monolith was Adol's reason for traveling to the island country in the first place. Its reason for being is anyone's guess. While never explicitly said, engaging with everyone in Barbados should earn us a sword. At least that's what the guide told me. Yeah, I looked at a guide a few times while playing this game. Ys 1 has no qualms about its lack of direction. This format is appreciated, but I know my red-haired teenager needed something to defend himself because the armor he's wearing is implied but not yet equipped. Allegedly, if we talk to Slav after speaking with everyone in town, he'll give Adol a sword. I thought I spoke with everyone. I almost went crazy looping around town several times. But hey, some people are still searching for Mew under a truck, and I'm not like some people. Oh well, no sword for Adol. The guy at Barbados' entrance told me to make like Christopher Cross and run like the wind if I couldn't handle my own in battle, but I think he grossly underestimates who's playing this game. I ignore the guard's advice. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, man. Everything could go wrong. Out in the fields of Asteria, Adol will encounter enemies. And if you're like me, you'll dive headfirst into the shallow water before figuring out how to save the game. This is a computer game, it's the escape key. It's always the escape key. I search for my first victim, a wood golem. Plot twist, I'm the victim. Thinking that, like the armor his sprite is wearing, Adol must already have a dinky version of whatever Slav was supposed to reward me with after talking to everyone in the first town. That would explain why I only do 1 damage every time I hit this Gibraltar. Hindsight is 2020. Well, the wood golem does 5 damage every hit and wrecks me. And at the time, I never figured out how to save my game, so 25 minutes of progress have been wasted. This is neither the first nor the last time I'll say this, but I'm a 70-year-old man trapped inside a millennial's body. So I start the game over and I try again. I get closer to killing old Woodward over here, and I die again. Title screen, new game. Before attempting my third go, I get to tinkering with the game's settings, which vary from how experience points display, you'll want that feature, to blood effects, whatever that means. You can choose if you want to display the 2001 or 2009 version of the game before starting. I abandoned the gold leaf display for the standard display. There's less visual contrast without the red and green going on, so it's not as distracting. I like this new display a lot more. At face value, Ys 1's presentation is pretty in your face. If the border, surrounded by leafy vines and 2 petrified angels hugging your status meters, didn't already give that away. It's a static display with selective business transactions, parsing information such as the health meter of the last monster you encountered, the current amount of gold you have, as well as the experience necessary to gain a new level, in addition to your current amount of health. Normally, I'd complain about a game advertising its name for its entire runtime. I may be mentally 70, but even a physically 70-year-old wouldn't need a constant reminder of what game they're playing. It strengthens the arcade visual that the game is going for, so I'll let it slide. I have no choice but to let it slide. What I will bicker about is that the HUD can sometimes be hampering as you try to navigate the field map, but its presence or lack thereof won't affect the inevitability of getting lost on a first playthrough. The fine print of finding the magic demands that you have to get lost in it. Overall, having access to this information at a glance is more helpful than it is harmful when gameplay doesn't concern navigation. It allows the player to gauge whether Adol should be where he currently is in terms of Ys's difficulty spikes. For example, doing no damage to this tentacular 3-eyed brain rock of doom is informative and helpful. If the audio cue of a blade rebounding from its carapace didn't provide my dumb butt a clue on the third attempt. For what it is, the arcade display communicates that Ys 1 is a product of its time. A computer game that loudly boasted that kids didn't have to shell out coins to bring the arcade experience to their game rooms of choice. This information is both appreciated and evident of a fine-tuned experience. Seeing as Barbados doesn't have a weapon shop and Adol's still without a blade, our only options are to continue getting reamed by literal freaks of nature, or continue onward. I don't want to wake up in the hospital for a 4th time in 40 minutes, so I'm gonna go with option B. I escape from the wood golem. That's a hint, Current Wiz. I'll be back for you, pal. When I say that he's my pal, I mean he's dead to me. Echoing the words of Barbados' guard on duty, I run like the wind. Taking a wide berth from every wood golem and Cyberman reject as I Christopher Cross my way toward the next town. Ironically, the epic music juxtaposes the tried and tested reality that Adol is everything. Everything but dangerous. Is Adol Kristen forever destined to be Asteria's greatest errand boy? Here's hoping that what lies beyond these crenellations brings some much-needed winds of fortune to let the poor lad proverbially lower his sails. We enter the fortress of Mania, and what do you know? A little girl tells us that a fortune teller has been looking for a traveling swordsman, and she's located in the southwest corner of town. So we visit the fortune teller, Sarah. Upon entering her business, Sarah recognizes Adol immediately. Long ago, she prophesied that a foreigner with red hair would cross the storm wall. But of course, Sarah won't share more with us until our equipment is in order. Lady, you're telling me. Adol needs a sword, a shield, and armor, all equipped before Sarah will reveal her intentions. And this is where the game really starts to open up for players. Minia is a place brimming with opportunity, and there's quite a bit to do here. There's several shops you can go to for trinkets and the much desired equipment we're missing, or houses you can visit filled with denizens willing to spill their guts to a complete stranger, sharing loose plot threads while informing you more about Asteria. Heck, you could even skip town altogether and chance some more violence for discovery, but you probably won't get far. I personally like to take the tavern first approach, followed by non-violently burglarizing people in their homes to see what information I can steal from them. Taverns are always full of characters. From the seedy to the oversharing, the best place to get the lowdown on any town is always at the tavern. So I hit up Ormond's Spirits. I like to imagine that conversation has been drummed up about Adol before arriving at Minia's only bar. Whether it's because he's the only redhead anyone has ever seen, the guy who the mysterious yet attractive fortune teller has been telling people to keep an eye out for, or the fact that he's the only traveler to make it past the storm wall. Adol has an appearance that stands out, instant social capital accrued from Sarah's interest in him, and a lion-hearted reputation that precedes him. In summary, he's acquired a passport of sorts, allowing entrance to conversational territories normally reserved for close friends of the patronage. That hopeful flame of friendship is immediately smoldered when we meet the trio standing at the head of the bar. For a moment, the jaunty music playing in the background feels like its merriment extends to everyone who isn't named Adol Kristen. When you first see these guys, you get the impression that you stick out like a sore thumb in a place where everyone knows each other. Everyone knows your name, but it's not an episode of Cheers. The bartender, God bless his ponytail despite that shiny scalp, looks like my grandfather. That's a look you can only pull off when the love of your life is no longer around to tell you, "Don, chop that ugly thing off." This guy immediately sizes Adol up. Knowing that we're new in town, he asks where we're from, but you can tell his polite question is a thinly veiled exercise in skepticism regarding Adol's morality. When he learns that we're Adol Kristen, he apologizes immediately. He was trying to make sure that Adol wasn't a thief, stating that Minia has been experiencing a lot of break-ins lately. "Those damned thieves come and go as they please. I think it's high time for a bit of hunting. Perhaps you'd care to join me." Garrick, the guy to the left, has been hired by the city to quote-unquote track down those dirty thieves. He asks us if we'll have a drink with him, to which we have the option to say yes or no. He also informs us about the rhoda trees of Asteria, whose seeds are said to be one of the finest delicacies in the world. Garrick asks if we've ever come across any rhoda tree seeds, because he'd like to try one just once in his life. The guy with the eye patch to the right, Donis, spills about losing a beautiful sapphire ring that he purchased as a gift for his wife. Without the ring, he feels like he can't face her. I bet his wife's name is Chi-Chi. Donis wagers that his lost ring is the thieves' doing. These three are great. I feel like we're going to start talking about manly things like which ales we prefer, the best practices for grooming facial hair, and how we got our scars. But most importantly, I'm hoping that one of these dudes can point me in the direction of equipment that can facilitate the kinds of things that give you scars, which we can discuss in a bit. I want to talk more about these dudes. Ys excels at immersing you in its world, and its character portraits are a testament to that. Every hub in this game has a portrait or three waiting to suck you into its kindness. That sounded a lot better on paper. Granted, I am playing a remake, but I think this specific portrait highlights a lot of subtlety hiding on the surface of Ys's mysteries. Its demeanor changes on a dime. When you first see these three, it's evident that they're a swashbuckling triple-threat trio. Whoever made this portrait had to have studied Da Vinci because there's divine proportioning from glance to stare all over this thing. Allow your eyes to sip the ale in front of you. The portrait's focal point is the scar on Ormond's arm. Maybe he earned it in battle or breaking up a bar fight. Who knows and who cares? What matters is that it was earned through violence. Immediately to the right of that scar is Donis' face. At first impression, his face and hand placement betray each other. Focusing only on Donis' face makes him look apathetic, but rest that chin inside of a palm with some loosely clenched digits, and that face looks like it belongs to someone who has immediately abandoned a warmth only alcohol and comrades can afford after being interrupted by your sudden presence. Your eyes mosey up to who the arm scar belongs to. A bearded bald man with a second scar gashed across his face. Forget pondering whether the first scar was an accident. This man has tasted blade and blood equally. I'll let you guess whether that blood was his or his enemy's. Like Donis, Ormond's body language is at odds with his face. His glance is concerning. His eyes are blank. His eyebrows are furrowed. His body's facing away from you. And again, you feel like you've interrupted someone. But this time, it's a man working hard to keep his establishment running, only briefly lapsing his disciplined focus to tend to his patron buddies. The angle of Ormond's face sends you off to Garrick. Cool, calm, and collected Garrick. His posture is confident. His chest is out on full display while his shoulder blades are pinched. One of Garrick's hands is entertaining a goblet of what is probably the tavern's finest. The other hand, most likely his dominant hand, hangs laissez-faire on the bar top. His free hand is more off of the bar top than on it, ready to grab the hilt of whatever weapon is hiding behind his belt at a moment's notice. Garrick's eyebrows are uneven, directing his attention toward Adol. Garrick's mouth agrees with his eyebrows, but it's also just ambiguous enough to keep you second-guessing his intentions. His buddies share similar mouth shapes. 2 out of 3 of these dudes can grow a beard, adorn a cape, or have at least one scar. All 3 men are involved with alcohol. In short, they're manly. You don't know what to expect from them when you first see them, and they're sizing you up in equal measure. But once you chat with each of them, their expressions and body language change entirely. Donus is no longer a judgmental assassin. He's a husband wallowing in his misery at the local watering hole, fearful of incurring the wrath of his wife over a much justified blunder. Orman is still business first. He doesn't have time to even face his friends. But he's a cautious and protective soul, concerned about the well-being of his tavern, as much as the male-patterned baldness enacted upon his city's treasures by the local ruffians we've just heard about. And Garrick, true to his posture, is inviting you to sit down among strangers, guzzle down a proverbial Guinness, and get familiar with everyone, while his liquid courage tells you about his aspiration to consume a legendary, world-renowned Rhoda seed. Of course, this is a remake of a 1987 game, and the original game wouldn't have been able to depict as much detail. But considering that this is like the 11th remake or something, it's a brilliant Kuleshov effect without using motion picture that, after reading less than a minute of dialogue, transforms this triple threat trio into Adol's Rage Brigade. After getting to know each of them, their words and positioning suggest 3 respective quest lines. If you read this image like a manga panel, that is to say, right to left, you could discern how their words can clue you in on some quests Adol can perform. Donus needs someone to find his sapphire ring, a side quest that can be taken care of before you carry on the main quest. Orman is the main quest in front of you, deal with the thieves. Garrick suggests the Rhoda tree seed, which will be important later. We learn that silver plays an even bigger role in Mania than it did in Barbado. At Orman's Spirits, we hear about a troubadour who's as talented at playing her silver harmonica as she is beautiful. This musician is Rhea, but her melodies have not been heard for some time, or in the words of tavern dweller Ricardo, "Just looking at her is a real feast for my eyes, but my ears are getting starved." You're gonna learn pretty quickly that everyone just breathes poetry in this game. Rhea looks a lot like the girl from the game's title screen, and she's the same lady who was playing a harmonica in the game's intro cutscene. She reveals to Adol that she plays ancient songs from Asteria's long-forgotten past, which should clue you into the story's grander mystery. As it turns out, all silver items have been stolen from Ania, and Rhea's harmonica is no exception. There's a boy who tells you that his grandfather told him a legend about a silver sword that was used to defeat an army of demons centuries ago. That boy's grandfather is at the town clinic after being ambushed in his own house, where the thieves ransacked the family's heirloom, the silver shield. Visiting the local pawn shop introduces us to Pim, who's missing a set of silver armor from his wares. He's sure received a glow-up from his TurboGrafx 16 days. Pim's new look has a flavor of Happy Mask salesman to it. It's hard to shake the feeling that beneath that smile is a man who only cares about money and putting on masks, all the while inflicting trauma on children growing up in the early 2000s that still remains unresolved. Pim says that because you're a foreigner, the same as him, he'll cut you a special deal. Yeah, right. And look at what we have here. There's a sapphire ring for sale. We can buy this ring for 1,000 gold, which, considering that Pim swiped it off the cobblestone, is 1,000 gold in profit. His title may be shopkeeper, even if the spelling and pronunciation are way off. You can purchase the sapphire ring and give it back to poor Donus, who will be so glad his wife's not going to kill him that he gives you 1,500 gold, netting Adol 500 gold. The faceless thieves also took Pim's golden vase. I said that as if he acquired it, honestly, which you can find at the bottom of a pond in the northeast fields if you're thorough enough when exploring the world. I don't exactly yearn to help Pim find his golden vase because he definitely shafted Donus, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't looking to enact some poetic justice by making him take a financial loss. You can sell the golden vase for 2,000 gold. This should give Adol enough money to buy some much needed equipment so Wood Golem and his pals can stop treating his corpse like an online Halo match. Adol starts the game with 1,000 gold at the beginning, which is enough to buy you one of the 3 items you need to continue Sarah's mysterious quest that she won't reveal until you have all of the equipped gear she's requested. Gold can be earned one of 2 ways in Ys: by selling valuables or by killing enemies. And you've already seen where killing enemies has gotten us without a blade. For the early game, you'll want to try and find some valuables to sell unless, you finally figure out that there's a weapon shop in Mania and you can buy the short sword for 500 gold. I will say that I did manage to visit our old friend for one last swordless embrace. And by old friend, I mean he's my mortal enemy. I thought disposing of such a foe would earn me a sizable reward. So we clashed. My fists into his bush. His stump left splinters in poor Adol's rump. He was fierce, yet I was fiercer. I looked down at the screen to see my hard-earned loot. I got 6 gold and 2 experience. Even in death, wood golems suck. Let's break that down. That's 100 wood golems to Adol's first level up, or 84 wood golems until he earns 500 gold. This was the long way of telling you that I recommend buying the short sword as your first piece of equipment. Once you have the short sword, may God still have mercy on your soul. The battle to level 2 is far from over. So let's get into the battle system of Ys. The bump system. The bump system. It's jousting, but really, it's not. Remember how the wood golems were rough? Well, getting the short sword only increases Adol's damage output. Translation? He's still vulnerable to taking heaps of damage from enemies until he can start purchasing and equipping armor. Have you ever tried to learn something new and experienced a sheer lack of appointment that you weren't a master at it right away? That's what getting to level 2 in Ys feels like. Most action RPGs will give you a weapon and tell you, hey champ, have at it. Ys makes you its punching bag until you can learn what it's asking of you. As more of a side note, I skipped farming wood golems for the blue Cybermen to reduce the experience needed, which was a little bit riskier, but doing this reduces grind time by 20 to 30 minutes, and that's not an exaggeration. Blue Cybermen give you 10 gold and 4 XP, by the way, for any of you number crunchers out there. Getting to level 2 took me 20 long minutes. First, you never want to attack head on. You're almost guaranteed to get counterattacked by doing so. Second, contrary to what just about any turn-based RPG will teach you, the second most dangerous position to attack an enemy from is directly behind them. Attacking while directly behind has a chance that the enemy will button hook, which is a football term for turning 180 degrees and facing you. And as we've established, you don't want to attack an enemy head-on. If you attack from the front or behind, you're going to have a bad time. Third, it might feel a little tricky at first, but the best angle of attack is any direction that is diagonal, preferably with the enemy facing away from Adol. Fourth, actually, there isn't a fourth tip. You know that stonks meme where it's like step 3, question mark, followed by the next step that says profit? Adol was born into this world with the bloody mess perk from the Fallout games. And after getting reamed by dirtbags for the first hour and a half of this game, good lord, it is one of the most cathartic experiences I've had in a long time. You can even find pickards out in the wild and make them explode into their offspring, which is cute and funny on the surface, but horrific when you think about it. Oh, and somehow every monster you defeat has gold. But that's a given. Never questioning why every monster has purchasing power in a fantasy world's economy is like the golden rule of RPGs. My next piece of advice would be to save. Dear God, man, save. You don't want to kill 4 demons and then have to restart from the last time you saved. I was stubborn. I thought I could outskill the freaks without saving. I was wrong. Learn from my mistakes. Actual tip number 5 is what I like to call the wait and heal. When you're out in the field map, if you stand still long enough, Adol will start to heal. Pretty self-explanatory. Make sure there aren't any enemies around though, because they respawn like a Metroid game. As I said earlier, the time spent getting your first level in this game is rough. To any players who'd feel like giving up because of this, I'd encourage you to keep going. This is the hardest level to gain and you're gonna suck at it. Adol's 16, he's not Bronn from Game of Thrones. It's a miracle that he made it past the storm wall, so cut him and yourself some slack. Getting to level 2 increases Adol's health by a whopping 75%, from 20 HP to 35 HP, and his damage output, well, let's just say I'm the monster now. I'm blasting freaks. Something very appreciated about the bump system in the first 2 Ys games is that it isn't limited to just battle. Surprisingly, it's a Swiss Army knife. On the battlefield, the bump system is life or death, but off the battlefield, bumping can function as both an action and an inspection button. Think of it like Ocarina of Time, but instead of being able to jump or climb with just the joystick, you can do almost anything. Want to talk to someone? Bump into them. Pick up an item? The bump system's got you covered. Open a chest? Clever girl. You know where this is going. You're one button remap away from being able to play this game with one hand. With this deceivingly simple, yet amazingly polished gameplay. My generation loves it for the big gulps, while Zoomers enjoy having a free hand for their fidget spinners, and yes, even Generation Alpha can enjoy this feature for, I don't know, probably watching Skibbity Toilet on their smartphones. Outside of sometimes getting trapped in the same conversation with someone, the bump system has no downsides, which isn't even a downside because that teaches you that every NPC has 2 to 4 things to tell you. And let me tell you, quite a bit of that dialogue is gatekept by the second bump. This brings up Ys's world building. This game is chock full of memories, re-memories, and, well, words in general. The memories and re-memories might be because we're dealing with a remake, but I noticed that certain NPCs will have a Dragon Quest feel to them. You'll chat with an elderly woman in Barbados who will tell you about how she refuses to leave town because she grew up there and that she has a son who lives in Mania. And then you'll find yourself in Mania talking to a family man who laments about how his mother won't leave Barbados to come and live with him. There's a woman in Zepik, a town we'll visit eventually, bickering about her husband Luda, who's gone missing. But if you happen to go back to Barbados sometime later to check in on Dr. Bluto and his nurse assistant who mended Adol back to health at the beginning of the game, you'll see that Luda has, once again, accidentally sleptwalked tens of kilometers from his home. He's got a character portrait, so he might be worth paying attention to. I experienced this firsthand when playing Ys, but I've experienced from several online communities that Falcom games tend to have a certain progression reactive flair to NPCs. While not explicitly said, each town's denizens will update their dialogue and behaviors as you get further along in the story. At the game's start, little Danny will tell you about how he's happy that the storm wall is around, because it means that his girlfriend Cheryl can stay in Barbados. The feeling isn't mutual for Cheryl, but Adol's journal entry about her says that she's still unwilling to leave her buddy Danny behind. Her entry goes on further to say that she's even more of a menace than Danny, always plotting an escape to Mania. So when you travel to Mania for the first time and then return back to Barbados, neither of the children are in their homes. Instead, they're outside holding hands and pretending to fight demons because the adults won't let them leave. Even the Pickards, true to their rabbit-like reproductive cycles, have multiplied from 4 to 12 in a span of hours. Ys truly is a world that you can feel. And I think its world building delivers on the slogan of what an era of kindness RPG is all about. This game is also great about building up characters and plot points in your mind well before you meet and experience them. It's a formula that predates Sephiroth by 10 years. He's a villain that you hear about long before you see him. But it applies just as equally here. In Mania, there aren't any thieves to be seen. However, the town's silver trinkets are missing, and you keep hearing about who's done it. Well, you'll eventually learn that these thieves have a headquarters at the cliffs of an area called Bagu Baded, an ancient crater with the blast radius of an atomic bomb. Furthermore, the thieves have a leader, and you can't help but associate him with this elusive man that several Manians have been talking about. The man in the black cape with a peculiar blue glow to it, whose aura sends shivers down the spine. According to one lady, he's a scrumptious-looking man who, at a glance, is debonair. Yet, when his almost inhumane eyes look at her, it scares her out of her mind. And according to a guy you'll meet later, he's a suspicious man in a hurry north of Zepik, where only monsters and thieves prowl. Whether the man in the black cape is thief or monster is as equally as likely as being thief and monster. It certainly makes you ponder the orb. So we finally get all of our equipment, and Sarah recognizes this. And now we can launch this adventure in style. She tells us about the Books of Ys, 6 tomes that chronicle the history of an ancient kingdom that disappeared overnight. No one knows who wrote the books, but they detail the land of Ys's fall from grace. Sarah tells us that the first book can be found in the mountain shrine, near the Thieves' Den. After accepting Sarah's request to find the books, she gives us a crystal that will show us the way within the shrine, whatever that means. But first, Sarah wants us to visit her Aunt Jiba in Zepik, a village located just south of the shrine in the northeast corner of the map. This game is full of great names. We've got characters named Haystack, Rossetti, Old Man Harrison, Bluto.
Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
And now we can add Jiba to that list. Zepik is a cozy little getaway with pastures, brooks, and bridges to its west, and a lake to its east. It's got about a 70-30 split of elderly to young people, which is a green flag for me given my affliction. Where there's a person who's lived my life almost twice over, there's an expectation that they have some valuable insight worth sharing. We hear things like how Asteria was once a bigger, lovelier country ruled by 2 goddesses, who saved the land from a great cataclysm. Or how the goddess statues that once guarded a chamber deep within the now abandoned Rastan mines have vanished, which some consider a bad omen. Who needs an intertitle when the title card is built into the game's HUD? I think my favorite character in this town has got to be Old Man Pablo, who just sits on the deck all day and sleeps while fishing. What a retirement plan. By all accounts, up until this point in the game, Zepik should not be here, succumbing to a fate similar to the mining town of Rastan, which we were told back in Mania was raised overnight by demons and bats? It's hard to suspend my disbelief that a cauldron of bats destroyed a town, but okay. Yet Zepik still stands, and you learn the how pretty quickly. The town has a silver bell whose chimes act as a demon repellent, or had. 30 seconds into meeting Adol, the mayor confides that the bell has been stolen. And we've got a pretty good idea as to who the perpetrators are. Adding to the hilarity of her name, Jiba's character pixel art is the most blurred thing I've seen since Sully Wazowski. She sees that Adol has Sarah's crystal and gives us the shrine key, followed by the standard, "Be prepared before you enter the unpredictable place filled with monsters," warning before farewelling us to get to the first book of Ys. And with that, we're off to the first dungeon. Just kidding, we're meandering. but our destination is a place we've been anticipating since Mania. Just to the east of the first dungeon, across a rope bridge, is the Thieves' Den. As I'm about to enter, I'm mentally preparing myself for a showdown. Maybe my Rage Brigade will show up to help me win back the stolen goods. Maybe I'll be negotiating blows in a Coliseum fight with the Thieves' pet monster for all of Mania's silver. With a game like this, you really don't know. What you find when you enter the den is quite the opposite. The guy at the entrance is the strong silent type with an intimidation factor that matches his burliness. He's obviously the muscle of this faction. If you open the chest next to the leader of the den, you'll find that it's empty. What kind of sad excuse for a thieves guild is this? When we approach the leader, we see that he's not wearing a black cape, and he looks like Sam Elliott if Sam Elliott decided to become an outlaw instead of a cowboy. This is Goban, which has a nice ring to it, the kind of name that belongs to a goblin from that time I got reincarnated as a slime. His opening line adds to the uncertainty you can feel when you arrive at the den. You're either brave or stupid, kid. What a great way to call someone fearless. Confronted about the lost silver, Goban hasn't a clue as to what Adol's talking about. We learn that the Thieves Guild is of the Robin Hood variety, stealing only from those who make their money exploiting the blood and sweat of honest workers. The pimp types, if you will. Well, that explains why his golden vase was at the bottom of the reservoir out in the fields. Goban tells us that all the silver has been swiped from the Thieves' Den as well, making it clear that the leader of the thieves and the man in the black cape who we heard about in Mania and Zepik are not the same person. It's an excellent subversion of storytelling that catches you off guard. Seeing as the man in the black cape was hurrying north from what we heard in Zepik, there's only one other place he could be: Solomon's Shrine, the first dungeon. In total, there are 3 dungeons in Ys, which might feel like an underwhelming number, but this game makes it clear that it's anything but. You could quite literally fit 8 or 9 of the dungeons found from A Link to the Past into these 3 dungeons. Entering Solomon's Shrine isn't possible without Sarah's Crystal, and accessing its lower depths isn't achievable without Jiba's Shrine Key. The story path leading up to the shrine mandates that you talk to its main cast, while planting ideas like, "Oh no, lost silver bell," in the minds of more dialogue-curious players. Aesthetically, the first floor sells you on its abandoned temple look. Its scattered beams of light peek through its dilapidated ceiling, providing a dim atmosphere, while its lower floors offer darker, maze-like corridors riddled with danger. There are 2 chests within the shrine's first floor. One is locked, encouraging you to have to backtrack at some point. The other treasure chest contains a ruby, which you can use to sell to Mania's most dignified scumbag, on the off chance that you'll need an equipment upgrade to counterbalance being underleveled. At this point in the game, I would say you should have grinded enough levels a bit before coming to Solomon's Shrine, because grinding levels is deceivingly addictive and the gold acquired from it provides a means for better gear. You can tell I'm overleveled because I take out the first boss in 3 hits. Oh yeah, this dungeon throws a boss at you before entering the dungeon proper, which is a nice change of pace to what I'm used to seeing in most RPGs. Maybe it's because I'm overprepared, but the first boss is fairly standard. Avoid the flames, realize that each flame's cadence is sequential while all 6 flames have the same limited reach, wait for the boss to appear, and bump into him. The flames do change their reach from equidistant to zigzag as the boss's health lowers, acting as a second phase. In spite of cutting through this boss like a hot knife on butter, its takeaway is that attacks on bosses are riskier than the garden variety demon. It reinforces what we learned in the early hours of Bump by needing to identify the correct angle of attack at a moment's notice, but also an escape route that will minimize the amount of damage incurred. That battle might have been easy, but the lower levels of Solomon's Shrine are nothing to take lightly. Down here, vision is limited, giving opportunities for enemies to ambush you. Corridors are tight, requiring you to plan out your encounters more thoughtfully, and without a potion, you can't heal. Earlier I said if Adol stands still for long enough out on the field map, his health will start to snail its way from low to full, or what I call the wait and heal. When you're in an East dungeon, the wait and heal does not exist, which is critical for reasons that we'll review soon. The dungeons of East function like a combination between Metroid and a dungeon crawler, not just because the game's get item theme is one note away from being Metroid's. In Japan, the subgenre of Metroidvania goes by a different name. They call it search action, which honestly sounds way cooler. There's quite a bit of search action going on here. When distilled, you're fighting your way through enemies, finding barriers to your progress, taking a mental note, and then returning to those obstacles to get what you need sometime later after having the prerequisite MacGuffin. But this backtracking is not exclusive to items inside of dungeons. In addition to advancing the game's plot, there are items that can also be acquired outside of each dungeon that will help you get to its end. And for Solomon's Shrine, this is largely optional, but heavily suggested. Finding the treasure chest key lets you open all locked chests in the game. Just like with the ruby that you can sell to Pym, the treasure chest key is a reason to go to the first floor of Solomon's Shrine, but it's also a reason to leave the dungeon entirely. Search for more treasure and grind, check in with villagers, buy new equipment, whatever's clever. You've been given another excuse to leave and come back. There's also a prison key that can be found which does exactly what you think it does. It opens the prison doors in the dungeon. If you start opening up the prison cells in the shrine's first basement floor, you'll stumble across another blue-haired babe from the title screen. This is Fina, a disoriented damsel in distress. Fina was imprisoned in Solomon's Shrine's inner sanctum by the fabled man in the black cape. You'll be given the option to escort Fina out of the dungeon, or continue exploring its depths. If you choose to continue the dungeon crawl, Fina will give Adol the Mask of Eyes, which reveals hidden passages at the cost of being able to see anything that's living, be that friend or foe. Continuing to adventure will lead you to some more keys for getting past locked doors, a silver shield for increased defense against demons, as well as Zepic's missing silver bell. Okay, Ys, I get it. I should leave. Now that you have the search action side of Ys's dungeon equation, here are the dungeon crawling variables. One of the best aspects of a dungeon crawler is planning. A dungeon crawler asks players to marathon their eponymous biomes inch by inch, hence the crawling part of that name. You try to get as far as possible with each dive while managing limited resources. You find a good stopping point and you return back to safety, repeating the process after resting. The resting part in that equation typically involves heading back to town, buying more things you need, and engaging in dialogue that will provide useful insight toward the overarching plot. Unless you're playing a modern Persona game, in which case you should ignore at least 1/3 of the dialogue. What's that? You telling me things I already know from 5 hours ago ad nauseum until I finish the dungeon 8 in-game days from now? To the spam folder you go. But a rest also provides comfort, whether that's a break from crossing paths with things that want to kill you, or the opportunity to restock on items needed to continue crossing paths with things that want to kill you. It's a relief to the tension. A good dungeon crawler doesn't ask you to speedrun it. Instead, it requests that you soak it up. And East does a great job of capitalizing on the formula with pizzazz. You explore its dungeons, you scour its mazes for riches. Often, the monsters deplete your health to a value you're not comfortable with, so you retreat. You get back to the comfort. Inside the safe zone, you tell yourself, okay, let's try to circumvent that werelion next time around. He went full wood golem on me that last time, as your health meter inches its way back to full. Maybe on the next dive you find a potion, but you can only carry one potion in your inventory at a time, and you already have a potion in your inventory. So you do some mental housekeeping. You memorize where you found the potion you can't take, and now you have an excuse to embrace more danger. The safe scumming is implied here. Why? You know why. If you want to progress the story a bit, bust Fina out of prison. If you were more keen while talking to Zepic's villagers, bring the silver bell back to its mayor. If you want a 2-for-1 special, do both of those things. You can even check in with the Thieves' Den, where they'll all be like, see, we told you we don't steal from everyone that's not Pym. Story-wise, you were introduced to a new character, proved the innocence of the local outlaws, and saved Asteria's countryside retirement home from early graves by leaving the first dungeon for these 3 reasons. Gameplay-wise, you're about halfway through the dungeon, and the leader of that town you just saved gave you the Power Ring, an accessory that doubles Adol's strength. Exiting the dungeon for the first time and returning might remind you that its first floor had a treasure chest that was locked, containing the shield ring, which reduces all damage taken by Adol by half. You can only equip 1 ring at a time, but these are near dungeon breaking items that relieve a huge amount of tension and give you more confidence to not have to save as frequently. Now, you're empowered to get through Solomon's Shrine with less difficulty, within reason. Watch out for those count demons, man. The second boss in this game, and the last boss in this first dungeon, is expectantly harder, but still a breeze once you figure out its scheme. You circle strafe around it while trying not to get hit by its mandibles, taking tighter turns so it doesn't trap you in a constant barrage of attacks that are hard to get out of. This boss's name is... well, that was certainly a choice. With the second boss defeated, we acquire the first book of Ys. Returning to Jiba, she tells us that Zepic's less savory inhabitants have all taken an unhealthy interest in Fina. And by less savory inhabitants, she means anyone that's not a woman. Yes, Fina is one tall glass of lemonade, and all of the men are thirsty. Even little Mark turns into a meme because he thinks sitting next to Fina on the dock means that they went on a date. Maybe not old man Pablo though. You know, only old man Pablo thirsts for fish. Or Luda because, you know, missing. It's some nice levity after a 2-hour excursion over at the shrine. We get to Mania to report back to Sarah, but she's not home. Instead, old man Franz is waiting for us and he's got some not so great news. Sarah was murdered off-screen. I'm devastated. Now, this might feel cheap. I know this is a kid's game. A kid's game that lets children make demons and cute animals literally explode into limbs and vital organs in their offspring. But, you might be thinking, well, why didn't we see Sarah's death? And for that, I can think of 2 reasons. Returning to Sarah after getting the first book was supposed to feel like a hard-earned victory, so losing her feels like an impactful setback. Case in point, at the time of playing this game, it's Christmas Eve night, and I'm alone because I couldn't afford to go back home to see my family this year. Sure, I'm probably emotionally vulnerable at the exact moment I'm reading about Sarah's death here, but I think I would have been upset regardless. The second reason the off-screen death happens is to add to the mystery and tension of the overarching plot. Ever since Mania, we've kept hearing about this feared man in the black cape with inhuman eyes who's stolen everyone's silver. At first, we mistook him for one of the thieves we kept hearing about until it was revealed that the man in the black cape had stolen from those guys as well. The plot has developed from thief mystery to murder mystery, and now we know the same perpetrator steals both silver and lives. You can actually talk to Pym about Sarah's death after, and the scumbag that he is, he'll admonish her for not predicting her own death and call her a con artist. This man's depravity knows no bounds. Anyway, Sarah foretold her death before it ever happened and gave the second book of Ys to Old Man Franz as a contingency plan. And when the old man found her, her last words were to tell Adol to head to the abandoned mine at Raston. And I'll be sure to do that, after I take some vengeance. If you check in with Slav back at Barbado, Adol will inform him about everything that's transpired. To which Slav will respond with, "You've got a heaping helping of destiny on your plate, Adol. Eat up, I say." Pretty frickin' righteous. Then he'll lead us to the only door that was locked inside of Barbado, which is holding the Tawar, a blade we're going to need if we want to damage the sublime monsters of Raston Mine, and bats. I can't understate how dangerous bats are. I think this might be the sword the guides told me Slav was supposed to give Adol after talking to everyone in Barbado, and it makes sense why you wouldn't get that at the beginning of the game. It's also neat that, earlier in the game, the Tawar was positioned as a blade that couldn't be purchased in Mania due to the latest shipment of Tawars being lost at sea from the Stormwall. This all points back to, you should talk to everyone in a JRPG, but it also reminds me of a quote that I like to repeat from time to time. Closed mouths don't get fed. Heading back to Bluto's clinic, we finally catch sight of who Luda from Zepik is, but it's a moment that passes as quickly as it arrives. He's a mysterious man indeed, albeit dangerously clumsy from all that sleepwalking. When you get back to Zepik, you can hang out with Fina at the dock and reflect on your journey. She just kinda repeats things she's already said. Who is she? Why can't she remember anything? I'll give it the requisite portrait points for reasons I mentioned earlier. She's reflecting on the journey just as much as the light bouncing off of the water in the picture. The same points get extended to Zepik's mayor for talking about the silver bell he wants you to get, with a picture of the item placed right behind him, as well as Pym's depot of debauchery, showcasing the items that you can purchase, also standing behind him. None of these are Tavern Trio elegant, but I can appreciate them for accomplishing what they were aiming for. Back at Strawberry Shortcake's house, Adol tells Jiba about Sarah's passing, and Jiba admits that she had a feeling it would happen. Wait, what? You couldn't bother to send her a warning in the mail or something? Jiba supposes that Sarah also probably knew what her fate would be and accepted it. She then provides a historical breakdown of the land, and I'm roped back into the adventure. Long ago, Ys was ruled by 2 goddesses and 6 priests. Sarah and Jiba are descended from one of those priests, specifically the bloodline of Priest Tova. With Sarah gone, Jiba is the only person who can read the books of Ys now, and we just so happen to have 2 of these books. So let's reveal their secrets. The first book, the Book of Hadal, reads, "Long ago, Claria was created in Ys. It was displayed in the Temple of Solomon as a monument to prosperity. But suddenly, disaster struck. In the shadow of that prosperity, evil had grown and brought with it the seeds of suffering. It struck with all-consuming fury, and in the wake of its demon hordes, even the fair land of Celsida became as ash. But even if all were to be wiped away, the prosperous and the suffering alike, the twin trees and the twin moons would forever watch over this land." The second book, the Book of Tova, states, "Ys was healed by the 2 goddesses and 6 priests. The goddesses embody the spirit of our land and inspire our lives. One represents order, and the other, freedom. If we were to ever lose them, all our struggles and achievements would come to naught, and we would never again know peace. We must not lose the goddesses, regardless of the cost, even unto eternity's shadow." With the foundation of Ys's history laid before us and a murderer still at large, we set out for the abandoned Raston mine to try and find more answers, as well as the third book of Ys. This brings up a curious design choice that will become obvious shortly from now. Adol has only 10 levels of experience in this game, and you should be around level 7 or 8 when entering Raston mine. Each level gained provides increases to Adol's base health, attack, and defense, which helps with tanking and dispensing damage. But the abandoned mine makes it apparent that that experience can only take you so far. Equipping items like the Tawar, the Silver Shield, and either the Power or Shield rings are necessary for bridging this gap. Despite all of this, the balance of power still weighs in favor of the enemy. Visually, Rastin is the darkest area in this game, limiting Adol's field of vision to a small radius around him. Musically, this area gets a lot of mileage out of its original PC-88 sound chip, hurling heavy synth waves and rhythmic percussion into your ears. In a word, it's frantic. It lends to the dread you already feel from navigating such a harsh area. And it should. This is Ys's most monstrously sublime dungeon. It's the area where demons first began to spawn in Hysteria, and it's the most dangerous area we've encountered since starting this game. I don't know if the enemy routines were souped up or if I'm late to noticing it, but if a demon sees you in this mine, they will pursue you without end, even if a barrier is blocking their way. Finding an alcove to wait and heal feels like a godsend in this place. But you never feel truly safe. Here I am trying to wait and heal, and Mr. Cyclops Boulder's just trying to steamroll me. So having a sound that makes it feel like you're being hunted adds to the terror. Falcom did a nice job scaring me in this dungeon. With the tension that you feel from being stalked by everything in this place, I'd say everything with limbs here, but, you know, Cyclops Boulder. It's certainly enticing to try and get to the end. God help us, whatever we may find. If you've been paying attention, however, you'll know that rushing in is a mistake. Finding all of the items in this dungeon is a must, and missing any valuables you'll need later will only force you to have to backtrack for them. The first 2 floors of the abandoned mine each have 2 large winding areas separated by a bridge. These bridges act as scenic safe zones. Yes, here you can enjoy what little natural light there is, and most importantly, you can wait and heal. These areas will be used a lot as you avoid any stairwell you find until you've scrubbed each floor clean of its treasures. Now's a better time than any to talk about items. The items of Ys fall into 2 broad categories, equipment and inventory. These categories delineate further into 2 more subcategories, active and passive. Inventory items have a few more quirks to them. You have consumable items which need to be equipped before use, like the healing and bestiary potions. The bestiary potion is an interesting one. It's a one-time consumable that'll display adult stats, monster stats, and yes, even bosom measurements of female NPCs in this game. Makes me feel like I got caught reading Makeout Paradise or something. When I first drank the bestiary potion, I swiftly died and decided to let it lie, because its effect lasts for the rest of the game after imbibing it. My HUD is already busy enough, and I'm trying to make a video with as little clutter as possible here. Items in the inventory can also be equipped and then used by pressing the action button, like with the Mask of Eyes. Items can also be equipped and used to convey passive boons, like using a key to get past a specific barrier. And then we have quest items like valuables that can be sold or things that need to be given to people. You can probably guess that armor will be passive equipment, but if you press the start button on your controller, you can switch the ring Adol has equipped instead of having to press the escape key and enter into your inventory every time. This is the most important skill to have as you navigate the abandoned mine. Well after finding equipment like the silver armor to better tough the dungeon's deepest level. Exploring Rastin fully will lead you to the timer ring, a ring which slows down the twitchy, knee-jerk movements of this dungeon's faster demons. Thorough investigation will also lead you to the healing ring, one of the best items in the game, which allows Adol to wait and heal anywhere. It's a game changer. No longer do you have to backtrack to safety. You can clear a dark corner of its ilk, say a prayer that none of their buddies come looking for them, and ever so slowly regenerate Adol back to glory, so you can continue to get to the bottom of things, while facing ugly things. But you'll find that switching rings is clutch. The healing ring is ineffective if you're on the move, so be sure to switch to the ring that feels best. I'm usually the guy who opts for more strength given the chance, so feeling like this was not an option in Rastin Mine was a great way to challenge my might is right philosophy. I found the timer ring especially useful on the mine's lowest floor. The demons on this floor move with meth head agility if you don't have this baby equipped. There's only one boss in the Rastin Mine, and we're going to talk about it. As we enter the boss room, we see a treasure chest. When trying to open the chest, oh no, it's those mortifying bats we've been hearing about. The bats are led by Vanguion, which sounds French, so I'm calling him Bat Dad. When I first heard about the bats back in Mania, keep in mind these are creatures that I've never once feared in any game. I felt like a goon from a Batman Burton film. The bat? I ain't afraid of no bat. What a bunch of hoopla. And then the hoopla takes you out like the Monday trash. First of all, you can't attack Bat Dad when he's in swarm formation. Attempting that is a quick trip to the game over screen. Secondly, this guy appears for maybe 60 frames when he's vulnerable. For anyone not familiar, that's exactly 1 second. Bat-Dad's vulnerability window always seems to trigger when he's the furthest away from you, which I think I read was an intentional design mechanic from the developers. Not fun. The trick is to goad him from cauldron to his professional wrestler pose by teetering between being too far and just within hitting range of him. Third, when you land a hit on Bat-Dad, you do 1 damage. You do 1 damage? Fourth, I forgot to save at least 20 minutes ago, so please just put me out of my misery now. Let me spare you all the time it took to recover that progress. Now that I've saved just outside of the boss room, I'm realizing there's no way the game took such a steep difficulty curve without reason. I'm at max level and I have the Talwar. But at this rate, I'm going to be fighting this guy for the next 2 weeks if he doesn't kill me first. There has to be a path to victory here. And there is. Outside the dungeon. Just like with Solomon's Shrine, we have to piece together the key items we found inside of Rastin Mine in order to make it happen. What we're about to embark on is what I like to call the Silver Sword side quest. When you're out in the field map, there are 2 big trees you can stumble into. One near Rastin Mine, and the other near, I don't know, somewhere south of Zepik. Still can't find my way around this field map. These are the Rhoda trees. You can find them out in the wild, you can trigger a cutscene which conveys some level of importance about them to the seasoned RPG player, and that's pretty much all you can do when you first see them. Until now. If you listened to Garrick once upon a time ago, he said he always wanted to try a Rhoda tree seed, which these big guys used to produce. And, as game design would consider that luck would have it, there's a Rhoda seed hiding in the Rastin Mine. It looks more fruit than seed, but that's apples to pomegranates. If you have this seed in your inventory and you talk to Garrick, who all game was talking about how he wanted to eat this thing, he'll do the most bro thing ever by telling you that you should eat it instead, for fear that it'll ruin his palate by forever being incomparable to anything else. And if you remember that Rhea had her silver harmonica stolen, well guess what? Rastin Mine. I prefer Rhea's tunes like I prefer Fina's company. Let's open up a lemonade stand, because these women have the juice. Rhea plays her signature tune from the intro, and you're shown the Rhoda Tree cutscene, which is a sign that you should visit both trees, and because this game tells you nothing. So we get to the northern Rhoda Tree, and just before chatting, we eat its seed, which sounded a whole lot better on paper than it does coming out of my mouth just now. The tree stirs, shocked that you can hear him. This tree is named Rhoda. What a missed opportunity to call this guy anything but a species name. It's like someone whose full name is Bob. It literally could have been anything else. Call him Timotry for all I care. He tells Adol, "O swordsman, travel ye to my brother, for at his feet lies a silver blade." So we get lost again, but we end up at the southern tree, eventually. The younger brother announces, "Darkness again stirs in the world. It brings another nightmare to Ys. O swordsman, thy journey begins now. The silver light beckons both hope and destruction. Lose not thy way. Lose not thy will. Leave thy heart open to the possibilities." We then get an action notification. Silver light began to spill out from the roots of the great tree. Silver sword has been bestowed. This is by far the coolest side quest in the game, if we even want to call it that. It's practically mandatory, and that's for a good reason that is to be continued for now. I did meander a bit on my way back to the abandoned mine. All that time spent in darkness needed some light to counterbalance it, and I couldn't think of a better way to do that than spending time with Ys's best waifu. Fina seems to be making a speedy recovery from being locked in a basement for 6 months. She confesses that thinking about Adol rescuing her makes all of that dread disappear, how he taught her courage, and how, thanks to Adol, she's been able to look ahead without ever feeling she must ever look back. And all I can think about at this point is how our children are going to look like ambitiously designed Fire Emblem protagonists. Yeah, babe. I can't wait to spend forever with you. The Bat-Dad rematch tees up rather nicely the second time around, and I'd say he's done for good this time. A big explosion, melted skin, an evaporating skeleton, all telltale signs that he's forever dead. Good riddance. We acquire the third book of Ys, the Book of Dabi. But there's also a mysterious chamber beyond the boss room worth checking out. Inside are 2 pedestals that look like they could fit statues on them, and a door with Ys's ancient crest on it that won't open. Old man Cronin told us about this room earlier in Zepik, and how it used to have statues of goddesses on each pedestal before the arrival of the demons. Very peculiar. Back in Zepik, we have Jiba interpret the Book of Dabi for us, which is the most climactic entry so far. "I speak now of the disaster of Ys. He rose suddenly and attacked our cities. He called forth molten stone from the bowels of the world to burn our fields and trap us in a sea of fire. It was terrible and absolute. One by one, our proud nations were blown out like candles, and darkness and chaos stole over our world. Surely, the Claria was the cause. Was it not the harbinger of darkness? Thus, we sealed it within the darkness, in the ground, so that hope may shine anew. Forget it not, and never lay hands upon it again. Given everything up until this point, including the large tower that can be seen from the game's beginning, the talking about an eventual visit to where the demons first materialized, and the deep impact of the risen crater of Bag-U-Baded, the third book excels at giving your imagination the steering wheel at piecing together what happened to Ys 700 years ago. I'm particularly blown away, no pun intended, by the imagery of Bag-U-Baded, which you'll see pretty soon here. Jiba reveals that the last 3 books of Ys are all hidden within Darm Tower. The Devil's Tower, they call it. It dates back as far as Solomon's Shrine. If you go there, I recommend you speak with my son, Goban. He should be able to show you the way in. So, Goban was Jiba's son all along. The whole Robin Hood reveal was already awesome, so this is just the cherry on top. The reason that the Thieves' Den looked quantifiably sad is because it was qualitatively sad. When the demons first appeared, swells of them were pouring out of Darm Tower. Goban sent his men to try and quell their numbers, but unfortunately, all was for naught. The demons quickly overwhelmed the thieves, so Goban and his remaining men had to seal off the tower's entrance. Just like with the Tavern Trio portrait over at Ormond's Spirits, this game throws a precognition at you with the den looking pathetic. It isn't until several hours later that you understand why that is. The first guy you spoke with, or at, when arriving at the den for the first time, is a good example of this. He's silent, and you're probably thinking, intimidation factor. But after hearing all of this from Goban's mouth, now you know. This man isn't stoic to intimidate me. This man has seen things. Goban tells us that his right-hand man, Dogi, has been missing inside of the tower since the invasion, which to me is exciting because in the very little reading that I did to excite myself before playing these games, this is a name I remember reading about. Dogi is supposed to be in multiple Ys games, and as far as I'm aware, he's the second most prevalent character next only to Adol. Goban asks you to meet him at the sealed door that the Thieves' Den has been guarding, and this is the game's point of no return. So now's the time for you to go and talk to any villagers before the situation starts to ramp up biblically. Not going to see everyone one last time was probably my biggest regret, but it's an excuse to replay this game. Goban tells Adol that he should only spend 1 day inside Darm Tower before the situation gets hairy. Make sure you're back tomorrow, with or without the Books of Ys. Goban's one-liners have me convinced that he's the type of guy that walks away from explosions. The leader of the thieves promises to reopen the sealed door at sunrise, and I'm thinking that I'm clever because I have a wing in my inventory, which lets Adol teleport out of dungeons. But just as this is happening, almost as if he's reading my mind, Goban confiscates the wing, stating that if I use it inside Darm, the tower's magical barriers will pull me into them and kill me, which is imaginably unpleasant. So there goes my get-out-of-jail-free card. Darm it all. And with that, we enter the game's final dungeon. Welcome to Darm Tower, all 25 glorious floors of it. Yes, you heard that correctly. Earlier I said you could fit about 8 or 9 dungeons from A Link to the Past into Ys's 3 dungeons, and I was not kidding. For comparison, including its bare-bones entrance level, Solomon's Shrine was 4 floors. I think Rast and mine was about the same. This dungeon is nothing short of enchanting. Despite Adol's level being capped at 10, the game's toughest enemies are located here. So completing the dungeon is about applying all of the skills you learned on your journey to their fullest, while also searching every nook and cranny for equipment that can close the damage gap you'll incur in output. I can see people getting lost in Darm and quitting out of frustration because this game doesn't tell you which floor you're on, and each floor contains anywhere from 3 to 7 rooms. It can get pretty hectic pretty fast. Also, this is something that happened in the previous dungeons, but Ys likes to pull these 180-degree switcheroos at its entrances and exits sometimes. And the last dungeon likes to do it too, but at unannounced moments, which only adds to the confusion. Like here, I'm getting damaged by the music of the area. Yes, the sound on the floor is killing me here. And when I find safety, oops, switcheroo. Back to a quick death I go. This tower, man. This Darm Tower. That pun was intentional. What's particularly tricky is the dungeon's outer balcony, which acts as a scenic wait and heal spot if you never found the healing ring. There are multiple doors you can enter each time you're out here, with most doors leading to entirely different areas that will only confuse you further. As I'm looking at the footage of my playthrough, I'm personally struggling to even give you a general directions on how to operate inside of this place, which I think is a testament to its amazing design. But I can give you 2 simple rules to follow so you're not as disoriented. Rule number 1 is pay attention to the stairs. If you see a stairwell, it means you'll be going up or down a floor. Do you see 2 stairwells? If you do, that means you'll be going up or down 2 floors. Rule number 2 is to save often. Not because it's good form given every dungeon so far, No, save often, because each time you arrive at a new area and you feel lost, your save file will display the current floor that you're on. The TurboGrafx version of this game is nice enough to tell you which floor you're on each time you arrive at one. This remake is not as friendly. This game trusts that you're resourceful, and it respects your ability to overcome its most challenging dungeon. Saving your game is no longer a failsafe. It is now your compass. Well, and you might encounter something that will obliterate you, so it's actually a failsafe too. The rules I provided earlier were definitely not discovered until more than halfway through this place, so there's a lot of leaping before looking going on in Darm's first hour. Do yourself a huge favor and get lost in this dungeon's majesty. This place is a lot of fun. As you start to feel the dungeon out, you'll see chests that have already been opened. And I take that to be a good omen. This means that at least one thief is still alive and well, despite being in this Tower of Doom for 6 whole months. Poor bastard must have been subsisting off of omukade for what felt like an interminable amount of time. When you finally feel like you're starting to make headway in this place, the indicator here being that you haven't seen the same hallway for the 8th time, Darm throws a curveball. After passing through a certain archway, you'll be greeted by 3 statues. And when you enter their crosshairs, Adol is teleported into a holding cell where another prisoner is waiting for him. Well, I'll be darned. It's Ludogema. And yes, I am having fun with these puns. Ludogema always announces himself as Ludogema, which I find hilarious. I'll spoil it right now. No one else in the first 2 Ys games has the last name Gemma. Dude, we know who you are. How could anyone confuse the guy who regularly sleepwalks 15 kilometers? Somehow, Ludogema sleptwalked? Into Darm Tower, which only makes this better considering that the dungeon's only entrance is barred at the Thieves' Den. I've exchanged 2 words with this man. I've explored 2 dungeons, defeated 3 bosses, saved a village of old people, recovered a lost ancient weapon, all of that to get inside of this place. This guy took a cat nap. I don't care who you are, you should always aspire to be awake what this man accomplishes in his sleep. Ludogema tells us that before he was thrown into the cell by demons, he was in a passage of the tower lined with the row of statues, where he saw an old man holding something, who then suddenly disappeared. The area he's referring to is near the dungeon's beginning. So now we kind of have an idea of where to go next if we can ever get out of here. And there's a second person in this tower whose name isn't Dogi. After about 2 minutes of pressing the inspection button around every crevice of the holding cell and feeling rather hopeless, it happens. The wall explodes by none other than the man I've read about, the myth I've imagined long before ever booting this game up. The absolute unit of a legend, Dogi. Even Xseed knows how memorable he is and gave him a character portrait that looks like it's breaking through the barriers of the player HUD. A little too late, Dogi warns us about how this tower is filled to the brim with traps. I'm not gonna lie, I ended up returning to the demon jail 2 more times. The second time was a sincere accident. I was a little too antsy to move onward through the dungeon. And then the game made fun of me. As expected, his silver equipment was missing, just as it was the last time. How embarrassing for him. Of course, everyone's favorite blue-haired Kool-Aid man burst through to save Adol, and after seeing his dialogue change, well, curiosity got the best of me to go back a 3rd time. Besides, I'd take any excuse to hang with my instant best friend. Dogi tells us that the man whom Ludogema saw disappear is named Rabba. Rabba has been at the tower longer than anyone else, and knows it like the back of his hand. So, we know who we need to find next in order to keep things trucking. The only issue other than a lack of orientation is that we have to use suboptimal equipment. So now enemies are more dangerous after having entered the cell and losing our equipment. All of this is a well-balanced formula for confusion, levity, and tension. You don't know where you're going in this ascent into madness of a dungeon. Amidst the confusion, the game doubles down, and you're stripped of your most valuable gear. Under normal circumstances, this is a blow to any hero's resolve. But you wake up in prison in the company of a chronic narcolept who announces himself as if there are 50 other guys in Hysteria with the first name Luda. There's barely any time to feel any doom or gloom over the next scripted 2 minutes of gameplay because you can't get over how ridiculous life is sometimes. A man literally fruit punches through a wall and then gives you a purpose to negate the aimlessness you felt. Find the scholar, he will guide you further. And now you have someone to look for in addition to getting the arsenal back to its former glory. When I first heard that Ys was a pivotal source of inspiration for action RPGs that came after it, I would have never conceived a scenario like this. But I think this entire ordeal is a standout example of why that is. Using the Mask of Eyes near the row of statues, near the beginning of Darm, reveals the room that Rabba has been stowing away in. And much to our expectations set by Dogi and Ludogema, I will not call him anything other than Ludogema. The old man delivers on their promises. Rabba came to the tower 6 months ago to study the ancient ruins of Hysteria when all hell broke loose. We find out that the idol he's carrying makes whoever wields it disappear. And we'll find out later from Dogi on the dungeon's intended path that he and Rabba have been working together to stay alive in the dungeon all this time. At one point, post-Demon's advent, Dogi was pinned down by demons, and Rabba, who happened to be near, unidled himself to save his hide. The how isn't explained, but given his disposition, Rabba probably baited and then pulled a Houdini. Since then, the two have teamed up, Dogi being the reconnaissance while Rabba acting the strategist. The old man explains that the 6 Books of Ys recorded that its titular land was proficient at magic, with a surplus of a silver-like metal. But as time went on, the name of this metal vanished from all of history. He goes on to theorize that a disaster similar to, but much more cataclysmic than the Stormwall, appeared all those centuries ago, causing the re-emergence of demonkind upon the land and the formation of the long-petrified Bagyub dead. The apocalyptic event killed half of the country's inhabitants in a single night, and by morning, Ys was gone, and the Dharm Tower appeared and has remained since. After the history lesson, Rabba gives us the blue necklace to get past the teleporter trap, and now we have 2 more objectives. Find a way to Dharm's upper floors, and stop the person who has returned havoc upon this land, the man in the black cape. After one of the easier boss fights in this game, Burn in Hell, Mantis Man, we grab the 4th Book of Ys, which we can't read without Jiba. We also get a hammer. Eventually, we'll enter the floor where the sinister music playing in the background will sap Adol's life, without a means to stop it. If you run into the first door you see, you'll find that Rabba has moved up the tower ahead of Adol, and is being held prisoner here. The demons caught Rabba and destroyed his idol of invisibility. Rabba tells us that the call of the evil chime is coming from inside the house, and we'll need to backtrack to find one of the pillars that look like stone organ pipes, which are channeling the wind into discordant pain. After some trial and error, we find and break that pillar, using the hammer that we acquired earlier. And thank Jiba. That music sounded like it was ready to take my soul. We make our way to a higher area called the Hall of Reflection, and the tone changes like we're about to enter a nightclub that only plays Tokyo Dream Pop. I mean, just look at this guy. The guy's having the time of his life. There's no better time than any to talk about the music of Ys. This is one of my favorite songs in the game, and coincidentally enough, it's called Dreaming. Of course it is. Have you ever heard a song for the first time, and it sends you? As in, you've never heard this song before, but it can take you to a specific time and place. Maybe it's the 3rd time I sat down to continue my progress in Symphony of the Night, when the gameplay loop and music of that game really started to click for me. Or when I binged the first season of Air Gear on a summer afternoon in the basement with the lights off, when my parents weren't home, because I knew Simca had the goods. That's what this song does for me. The theme Overcooled also sends me. Outside of beckoning my introspection, this song is the perfect companion to the Hall of Reflection, as well as another area we'll arrive at in the near future. It's similar to the theme in Rastin Mine, which I learned is called the Beat of Terror, which also makes sense given its leading percussion. Except, instead of inspiring me to get through a scary place as fast and unscathed as possible, the percussion here makes me want to bop my head and shimmy. Like the reflective floors of the hall, the synthesizer goes glossy. Add in some reverberating piano and a woodwind instrument, not sure if that's a violin, but it very well could be, and I'm hooked. There's no need to bust out the macerated fruit with this one. We've got ourselves a certified jam. The composers of the first 2 Ys games were Mieko Ishikawa and the legendary Yuzo Koshiro. The music in Ys Chronicles Plus is a rendition of the original soundtrack, but it's also a marriage of past and present. Yuzo Koshiro got his start at Falcom, and was just 19 years old when composing for Ys 1, which was his 3rd composed title at the time of its release. As more of a side note, his sister Ayano also worked on the game at the age of 17 as a graphic designer. The two own their own company now, which you're probably indirectly familiar with. Currently, Mieko Ishikawa still works at Falcom acting as company director and managing one of its graphical units. But back in 1988, she was one of the founding members of Sound Team JDK, Falcom's in-house band that handles the music production for all of its games. The music in Ys Chronicles Plus was arranged by Sound Team JDK, revitalizing songs like Yuzo Koshiro's First Step Towards Wars, with bombastic hair metal self-confidence. When you listen to the PC-88 version of this song, you can hear the inspirations behind it for all that the system's sound chip could offer. Synth waves meant to mimic the drums and guitars. And when you hear the Chronicles Plus rendition, you can gather that a lot of love was put into fully realizing what Koshiro intended. If you weren't already sold on Ys games, the name Yuzo Koshiro should sell you on them alone, regardless if you were familiar with him before watching this video. To say that he's a musical genius would be an understatement. He's a musical god. The man has etched quite a legacy for himself with contributions that are impossible to ignore. Koshiro composed all but 3 of the songs for the 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog, after realizing he couldn't convert all of Masato Nakamura's 16-bit composition to the Sega Game Gear. Koshiro is one of the 2 people responsible for creating the soundtrack for the entire Streets of Rage series, which, if you haven't heard any of those soundtracks, save those to a playlist immediately. If you're ever feeling down, I'd highly recommend listening to Go Straight, because that'll get you out of bed. He composed that soundtrack using his own audio programming language and the PC-88 sound chip as his Chimera instrument of choice. This same Chimera instrument was used to compose the soundtrack for the Etrian Odyssey series. If you've ever enjoyed any music from a Super Nintendo game, you can probably thank Yuzo Koshiro for that as well. Music samples on the Super Nintendo had a strict limitation of only 64 kilobytes. By Jove. I don't know what magical incantation Koshiro used or which entity from the astral plane he made a deal with, but the man found a way to work around that sound data limitation while working on ActRaiser, and everyone in the industry replicated it. Terra Enigma, Namco Cross Capcom, Castlevania Portrait of Ruin, Secret of Mana, one song from Metaphor ReFantazio. Yuzo Koshiro has worked on all of them. Everything I've just mentioned? Less than 10% of this man's composition portfolio. This is more speculation than anything because I haven't played all the games, but Ys's Rest and Mind theme was used in Ys 6, so it must have carried quite a bit of weight for Falcom. If we used only one word to describe all of the music in Ys, that word would be adrenaline. In an interview in 2001, Koshiro stated that he likes to match his music to the tempo of the characters in a video game. And that makes sense to me. The music in this game compels you to push forward. I think a shining example of this ethos is in the song Tension, which plays at Darm Tower's highest levels before the game's climax. But all of the music in this game is a sonic injection of enthusiasm. We see Rabo has made it to the Hall of Reflection, and he's in pretty bad shape. Beaten and bloodied, he tells us that 3 stories above us is Rado's Annex, where a young girl is being held captive. I'm just as puzzled at how Rabo knows this as he is about proper wound care, but I appreciate the intel. He also tells us that the door to the Annex can only be opened by one with an evil heart, which, according to my glancing at other Ys titles, Adol can't hope to fake for another 8 games. So we'll probably have to find a workaround to get past that evil essence detector. It's at this point where, without a guide, you might be prone to losing your darn mind. Ha 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 ha. If you try to go to any upper floors, you'll be barred from entry without another key item, the rod. But if you take a look at your inventory, you'll also see that we have the demon ring, whose item description states that it will destroy any who would wear it. So these are the 2 items we're going to need if we have any hope of moving forward. You can acquire the rod by fighting this guy higher up in Darm, but just like the last boss, he's too forgettable to talk about. You'll probably see him in 4 to 5 Zelda games anyway. Beating him earns us the rod and the 5th book of Ys, which we still can't read. The one great thing about this encounter is that it communicates a passage of time. Before fighting What's-His-Face, the outside balcony was pitch twilight, as if the last rays of sunlight were about to disappear behind the horizon. When you return to the balcony after the boss, it's nighttime and you can see the reflection of the twin moons on the sea, which is neat. You can see me here on the higher floors, trying and failing miserably to get a view containing both celestial bodies. As you know, seeing twin moons in any RPG is its own reward. We finally regain the silver armor. We also get the battle shield, but then Darm says, "You activated my trap card." So we equip the battle shield and come out on top against these monsters ambushing us. The next area we enter either above or below the battle shield, I lost track hours ago, shows an important design choice from the developers. I call this teaching moment the Scorpion Wall o' Death. When you get to a specific room, you'll run into a narrow hallway, and at the end of that hallway is a wall of demon scorpions with 2-pronged stingers. You have to ignore all of your training to kite the scorpions out into a wider vantage, because if you do that and try running past them, there are more waiting for you where they will strategically form a pincer attack, and the Wall of Death will morph into a Sandwich of Death. If you don't kill these guys in time, they have buddies in reserve, ready to join in on your murder. This acts as both an item check and an item alert for Adol. Without the battle shield, you're kinda SOL, and you need to do some more exploring to find it so you can tank the damage just enough to get by. The developers were intentional about this, placing a treasure chest with a health potion right after you get past the Wall of Death, Checking Adol's inventory, you can see that there are equipment items missing in the same row as the battle shield, which should clear you in on needing better gear. Getting up to the next area finally gives us a payoff the length of this entire game. At the beginning of this video I said, I'm anticipating a Here's Johnny at some point. And here it is. As we're running past a longer horizontal area, some goons pull a dogie and give chase. They're hard to kill just like Bat Dad without the silver sword, so I scoot on out of there thinking that this was the right choice. This was the wrong choice. The next boss fight is with the twin heads, which really is par for the course in Asteria. Twin goddesses, twin trees, twin moons, twin scorpion tails, and now, twin floating demon heads. I should probably call my twin sister to complete the cycle. I can't really defeat this boss without a weapon upgrade, but I figure out that you can only damage the yellow head. If you successfully attack it, both heads will immediately trade places. This fight commands some expert strafing. Like the previous bosses, it requires you to carefully retreat after planning your attack, so as to avoid the octahedrons from the head you need to hit and the fireballs from the head that you need to flee. When's the last time I saved again? Oh yeah, right after I entered the Hall of Reflection for the first time. Past Wiz was not looking out for present Wiz. On my second soiree with the impervious wall lurkers, I decide, what the heck. Let's try to go into the wall that was just destroyed. This is where we find the flame sword. There's also another treasure chest that you can find surrounded by more teleporting statues, somewhere around this area, where we'll find the battle armor. Luckily, they only teleport you to just outside the room, an extremely generous penance, given what I've been through in this dungeon. For anyone who hasn't played this game, if you think you know how bad things were when I started Darm Tower, well, I've got some beach property in Arizona to sell you. Flame sword equipped, we head back for the twin heads. Each time a fourth of their health bar depletes, they lose a projectile, but the projectiles spin faster. It's a good balance of relieving some tension while adding more difficulty. Twin heads defeated, we finally get to the top of this goddamn tower. Alright, that's the last one for this part of the video, I swear. You can only reach the top of this tower if you have the blue amulet. And this is me we're talking about, so I do have it, but we're gonna pretend I didn't do a bunch of heavy backtracking before having a rematch with the twin heads to explain my favorite sequence in this dungeon. There are two floors that we need to get to in order to find the blue amulet. Floor 11 and floor 16. The trick is that these floors require you to pay close attention to where you are at all times. If you don't resort to finding the nearest corner to cry in, you'll need to repurpose save scumming as your dungeon compass. To reiterate, I like this mix-up on the save function. Xseed could have easily adopted the TurboGrafx CD version of Ys and announced every floor as you entered, but they didn't for the Chronicles Plus version, and the entire game seamlessly triumphs because of this. It forces you to intuit a tool you've been using all game for surviving unforgiving leaps in difficulty, and in a way, it's like a Kojimification of game design. Floors 11 and 16 are Goldilocks zones. They're sandwiched ever so gingerly between two floors that are easy to run through without a second glance. Earlier, when we saw Rabba on the 13th floor, he told us that there was a young girl being held captive on floor 16. So, we'll go there first. If you're saving your game every time you go out on the balcony, you'll get tripped up, because the 16th floor's two exits will take you to either floor 15 or floor 17. So you want to find the door that's sandwiched between the two with the light shining out of it. This will take you to the sky bridge leading to Rado's Annex. Tell me this isn't the most beautiful scenic point in Ys, and I'll call you a liar. That's some prime moon viewing. After entering the Annex, we see a prison empty of sanctity and life that isn't undead. Those poor Thieves Guild members. After pouring one out for the homies and fighting ghouls, we ascend a spiral stairwell illustrated diagonally a la Super Mario RPG, leading to the evil door, which looks like it wants to consume all of Adol's humanity before letting him enter. Blue necklace already equipped, this thing is supposed to ward evil, we take a deep breath. Equip the evil ring, we don't die, and the evil door opens. Inside is a blue-haired goddess, but it's Rhea waiting for us instead of Fina this time. Rhea says that she allowed herself to get captured so she could inform Adol about the man in the black cape. His name is Dark Fact, which is easily the coolest name in this duology. In addition to stealing all of the silver in Asteria, Dark Fact summoned the Stormwall, and called forth the demon army to conquer Asteria, and quite possibly, the world. We learn that Dark Fact has been trying to gather the books of Ys for some unknown purpose, and Rhea makes it clear that this should not happen. We still don't know what reading all 6 books does to a man outside of being well learned, but we take Rhea's word that Dark Fact reading all of them will lead to gloomy certainties. At this point, I need no convincing. I've gambled my life on numerous occasions, met a bunch of cool people, lost Sarah too soon, and rescued my future wife from prison. I'm pot committed. Rhea doubles down on her wager. saying that Adol is one of the few people who's earned the right to read the Books of Ys. She gives us the monocle. She then states that once all 6 books are read, the full scope of their legends shall become known. So we read the 4th and 5th books. Book 4, the Book of Mesa, reveals, "We have finally found ourselves cornered in the Temple of Solomon. The 6 great demons dog our every step and will soon be upon us. We have decided to leave this land for now, in hope that we may one day return. Take heed, O divided peoples, for grievous times loom upon all paths of the future. But do not lose hope, for time has decreed that a guide shall come. O peoples, still your laments." Having a diegetic explanation for why there are bosses in this game is unexpected, but the bigger reveal is that Adol's presence in Asteria was written in stone centuries before the fact. Book 5, the Book of Gemma, Luta, reads, "He came, bringing his demon hordes with him, and amidst our darkest terrors, the goddesses disappeared. They have not been seen hence. Have we been forsaken? We, the line of Gemma, know an ancient story. It speaks of an amulet made of a translucent blue crystal. This amulet, the story says, had the power to destroy the demon's dreaded curses. Take note, however, of the weight that time has wrought upon this tale. Proceed with wisdom, for there is danger." So we can piece together that the amulet mentioned in the Book of Gemma is the blue amulet, which means that Asteria's drowsiest probably has it, if you can find him. This is the last key item barring entrance to Darm's summit. Before leaving the Annex's holding room, you can talk to Rhea a second time. She'll push you along, saying there's something she must do and to keep going. Before Adol leaves, she gives one last warning. Darkfax's cape has been augmented with Claria, the magical metal of Ys. If Adol does not have equipment made of the same metal, Fax's defeat will be highly unlikely. Getting to the 11th floor is a bit more of a slog. The room we're looking for can only be reached by trial and erroring the 12th, 9th, and 10th floors, paying meticulous attention to where you're going. But it's like Asteria's very own John Paul Jones said, "Surrender be darned." Look, I know I said I wasn't going to make another pun, but those are his words, not mine. You can tell you're near Luda Gemma when you found the Trail of Blood. "Adol? It's me, Luda Gemma." "Oh, pardon me. I almost mistook you for Hypnos Gemma. I was hiding out with Rabba, but the monsters located us. I managed to get away, but hurt my leg rather badly in the process." "I think you're confusing your vital organs for your leg." Luda Gemma notices that Adol has the Book of Gemma, explains that he lost the tome as a kid, and recognizes that he should give us his other family heirloom as the legends have advised. Blue amulet acquired, it's time to face Dark Fact. Soon. Let's talk about the design of Darm Tower. Plain and simple, this is the best dungeon in Ys 1 and 2. Darm Tower is a heist mission that's not all too different from the Opera House in Final Fantasy VI. What do I mean by this? The Opera House acted like a dungeon. It had enemies to fight, tasks to complete, and a boss to overcome at its close. But the Opera House also had cutscenes leading up to and during its sequence. It had narrative decisions that impacted the outcome of the event. I could list several examples of how this design works in other Final Fantasy games, but let's stick with Final Fantasy VI for now. Visiting the Gestalian Empire in Final Fantasy VI operates on a similar template. You meet with the Emperor. He gives you time to try and persuade soldiers to join your cause. There are cutscenes at critical points. You answer questions that impact the rewards you're given at the end of it all. One of the more relatable examples that uses this design philosophy that's not a Final Fantasy game would be breaking into Viper Manor in Chrono Cross. Arguably the most memorable part of Chrono Cross for me, this is a heist mission that follows the exact same template as the Opera House. The only thing separating Darm Tower from these other examples is a lack of narrative choice. Your decisions don't impact the outcome of this dungeon. Where I'd give it some wiggle room is that you won't gather the full dialogue from your heist buddies if you don't try to talk to them more than once. And information gleaned from their extra lines of dialogue will definitely impact an important outcome near Darm Tower's end. But the dungeon and cinema are all there in Darm Tower. In the first 2 dungeons, you have the opportunities and game-necessary reasons to leave, visit villages, and come back. But you can't leave Darm Tower. Because you can't leave Darm Tower, the village is brought to you. You have your heist buddies ready to aid you in your journey. Each heist buddy acts as a party member from a traditional JRPG. You can't use any of them in battle, but they each play an integral role in getting through the dungeon. You've got 2 back-to-back fraternal meet cutes with Luda Gemma and Dogi. Dogi, the wall-clobbering thief that he is your demo man, ready to bust you out when you need it most, and point you toward Rabba. You've got Rabba, the wise old man who's ready to provide lore exposition, as well as vital info about the tower's critical areas so you can advance further. Rhea acts as the inside man, intentionally getting captured, handing you one of 2 mission-critical items needed to beat the game, while suggesting the final boss's critical flaw. And finally, you've got Luda Gemma, who's like a wild card. He shouldn't be here. It's amazing that he is here, and he has the final critical item needed to reach the tower's summit. All of these people are intriguing in the sense that they're here by circumstance. Like Luda Gemma, none of them should really be here, yet here they are busting you out of prison, while also providing either indispensable information or key items to help you pass the dungeon's finish line. We have truly found the magic in this game. We reach the top of Darm Tower, and see its reflective tiles replete with a ziggurat made of dark energy that has the visual effects of someone closing their eyes after trying DMT for the first time, hypothetically speaking. We meet Dark Fact. Well now, you must be the swordsman dear Rhea spoke of. My headcanon is that this guy sounds like Liquid Snake. Your efforts to acquire the Books of Ys have been truly impressive. I salute you. But in unlocking the secrets contained therein, you have brought my plan full circle. Upon your death here today, the name of Dark Fact shall be seared into the pages of history. Your efforts shall all be in vain. With your final breath, you will curse your weaknesses. If you don't have this speech memorized at some point during a playthrough of this game because it took you hours to beat this boss, I salute you. The final battle begins and the results are quick. Homing comets firing from every which way. 3 total comets aiming for the last 3 steps Adol takes as each comet splits into octo-directional, almost unavoidable, bursts upon impact. Each time a burst makes contact with Adol, he loses about 5% of his health bar. Jesus H. The long explanation of what's happening is, well, this sucks. The short explanation is, this blows. As this is happening, Dark Fact flies around in a pattern that I can only describe as a sinister DVD loading screen, where the DVD logo actually hits the corners of the borders sometimes, instead of tricking you into believing it might. During my first volley with the final boss, I noticed that I got 1 hit on Dark Fact. Don't ask me how, I still wasn't sure at this point, but I'm getting Bat Dad flashbacks mainly due to the damage I'm not inflicting. There's no time to take in the cosmic ambience of arcane symbols, white dwarf stars on the verge of supernova, and sombrero galaxies spiraling around the arena, because any confidence that I will win this battle is spiraling downward at least 100 meters past zero velocity. The only reason I can tell you I saw this cosmic imagery is because I was actually able to observe them while Adol's corpse was getting obliterated by the epilepsy on the game over screen. I'm going to share the harsh truth with you about Dark Fact from Ys Chronicles Plus on the PC. His rate of fire is proportional to your monitor's refresh rate. So when you're playing the game using a gigabyte monitor, you are SOL, my friend. The phrase, "I've got the power of God and anime on my side," can feel like quite the morale booster. That is, until you come face to face with the anime god that is Dark Fact. After getting tossed around for a while, several thoughts occurred to me. I started to think about silver. Silver has to be one of the most frequently used words in Ys 1. Silver is what brought the country of Asteria its recent economic windfall. It's the metal that invited the presence of demons in the Stormwall. Silver is what Dark Fact has stolen from all of Mania and the Thieves' Den. Rhea plays the silver harmonica to wake the Rotatrees, who reveal the silver sword to Adol so he can beat Vanguion. Sorry, I mean Bat-Dat. Before entering Darm Tower, Goban advises that you've mastered the silver sword. When you get thrown in demon prison, the game reminds you how unfortunate it is that all of your silver equipment is missing. And Rhea's last optional message to you regarding your fight with Dark Fact is to be sure to use the same material his magical robe is made out of, although she calls it Claria. So, in a moment of fleeting brilliance, I equip the silver sword. And what do you know? I'm actually able to start taking chunks out of Dark Fact's health bar. Which is what I would have said had I arrived at this idea independently. No, I looked this up after getting frustrated for the umpteenth time. I think Rhea talking about Claria is what probably threw me for a loop, which I chalked up to a localization error at the time. Well, that, and having the flame sword and battle armor is a must for the upper parts of Darm, as well as the Twin Heads boss fight. I'll give you some channel lore here. I think a mark of excellent game design is when a game can take a seemingly innocuous convention and beat it against your head over and over until it becomes second nature to you as a player. Eventually, that reflex gets so ingrained into your psyche that you don't really even think about it that much. But then, you're getting your butt kicked and you think, well, I've expended most of my options. What's left? And you realize that the answer was inside of you the entire time. You catch the lightning. It's a philosophy that can be seen across many genres of game. And it happens to be in 2 games that I can think of while writing this script that involve catching lightning. So, back in 2020, when I was thinking of names for my channel, I creatively decided to call it Catching Lightning. Remembering to switch to Adol silver equipment catches lightning. At the time of recording, Ys is almost 40 years old. Having a moment like this, a moment where the light bulb is supposed to go off in your head and realize that the words difficult and impossible are cousins who are often mistaken for each other, makes this game timeless for me. Now that the silver equipment is on Adol, this fight is difficult, but not impossible. However, 144 Hz monitor. I'll spare you the 2 hours of trial and error I spent trying to conquer Dark Fact by distilling our fight into something more palatable. Dark Fact is a Mortal Kombat test of might. Each time you land a hit on him, he makes the platform you intersected with him at disappear, restricting your movement by one fairly chunky tile space. If you're not careful about redirecting Adol when you do make contact with Dark Fact, he will void you out of existence with the tile you just damaged him on, which gets you one step closer to memorizing his evil speech. The 3 consecutive comets that come flying at you at what feels like every 30 frames can't actually harm you until they make impact with the stage. So that's a great piece of trivia to know, considering how ridiculous their spray is. The key is to trace Dark Fact's somewhat predictable movement pattern and lead him into an interaction that doesn't compromise your strafing too much. Once you make contact with the boss, you'll want to get parallel with him or do a button hook formation, immediately changing Adol's direction so you can land multiple attacks against his hitbox. It's definitely achievable despite the ridiculous refresh rates, and I am a stronger man for having completed this boss battle without handicapping my PC's frame refresh rate. But also, I don't know how to handicap my PC's frame refresh rate. I started Ys on Christmas Eve, 2024. I defeated Dark Fact on Christmas Day, the following morning, 5 minutes into booting the game back up. It's amazing how a full night's rest can conquer emotional tilt. Upon defeating him, the screen fades to white, revealing the battle-torn stage we danced on for most of the evening. It might not be accurate in its presentation of just how many tiles are missing, but I digress. Adol obtains the 6th book of Ys, the Book of Fact, and after rereading the other 5 books, we open its pages. Suddenly, in the new light of the rising sun, his siege stopped. Wherefore it happened, no one knows, even now. But there was rejoicing, for it meant the end of our suffering. To ensure that he should never return, we have sealed away the power of Ys. It lies within the 6 books, and will be given to one who collects them all, so that he may become a guide and lead us to peace. But heed, ye who read these words. Those who use the powers of demons shall one day be consumed by them. The prosperity held within is a lie. It is he who leads that shapes the form of evil. All that is, jewel and adamant alike, is a treasure of Ys, as given us by our merciful goddesses. The 6th book read, Adol is surrounded by all of the tomes he collected. The screen fades to white again, and we see the game's end card. The morning sun began to rise. Gradually the sky brightened, and the tower's outline began to shimmer like a mirage. As if freed from captivity, birds began to sing, and the demons dissolved into air. Adol felt the weight of a long journey lift from his heart. The world was at peace. It was as though the historic bounty of Ys had been laid before him, to fill his eyes and soul. As the things written in the books vanished, one by one, the shapes of the goddesses began to materialize. Though their faces were unfamiliar, Adol felt, in some way, that he had always known them. As he looked down upon the earth, he could see Jeeba's house, quiet and humble. He wondered if Fina's memory had come back. He decided that when he returned, he would immediately tell her of all that he had seen. A dazzling light, seemingly from all sides at once, bathed Adol in radiance. He felt certain that it must be wishing him peace and good fortune. And so, Adol began a new journey. As the text ends, we see Adol's destination, the ancient land of Ys, high up in the clouds. Who or what awaits us is a complete mystery, but we know it's bound to be another grand adventure. Unsurprisingly, Ys sold well, and its sequel came out a year later. Surprisingly, that sequel decided to boot right the heck up and throw me into its action after finishing the first game, without skipping a plot beat. We're treated to a cutscene. We see another man in a black cape appear before a gold-crested wall jewel thing. These two, I'm assuming the magical talking jewel has a spirit inside of it, observe that Adol has surpassed the challenges of his first adventure, and are waiting with bated breath to see just what our hero will do now. No time to think, we're greeted with an intro that is koshiro adrenalined. I was already enthused to play, but now I may just have to attempt this second game in one sitting a second time after an intro like that. It's neat how the duology almost telepathically senses that I was gonna boot up the sequel by immediately putting me in the shoes of Adol and showing what happened after he read all 6 books of Ys in the first game. What's not as exciting is that we're finally where the last game did all of its table setting for. So even though expectations were high about what was going to happen when we finally arrived in Ys, for better or for worse, a more active imagination might find the floating island to be less exciting than what they had envisioned. Ys 2 opens with a perspective shot facing a young girl wearing a toga. This is Lilia. After reading all 6 books of Ys, Adol was enchanted and spirited up to the floating land in epic fashion. Lilia had a premonition of this and found Adol, returning him to her house to take care of him. Regaining consciousness, Adol once again finds himself in bed, but this time, it's in a house in Lance Village, surrounded by Lilia and 2 other people, Benoa, Lilia's mother, and Leonor Ral. That name sounds like he belongs in Thundercats. Leonor is an attendant at the village's clinic. Similar to Asteria below, we learn that 6 months ago, demons also started appearing up here, specifically within the ruins of Mundoria. We learn that the ruins hold entrance to Ristini Mine, which sounds really similar to Rastin Mine from the previous game. It kind of gives you some fragments to piece together where this area would have been all those centuries ago. These mines are interspersed with sacred chambers devoted to the 6 priests of legend, the same priests whom the books of Ys are named after. Benoa is even kind enough to share with us that iron ore and herbs are quite abundant around such spots, and how the people of Lance Village would often gather them with a process called mining. How innovative. Benoa sends us off with a letter meant for Leonor's brother, Dr. Flair, at the Two's clinic somewhere in Lance. Despite looking healthy, Lilia suffers from a severe unnamed illness, and Benoa knows Dr. Flair can procure just what she needs. And with that, we can begin Ys 2. This game pays attention to informing both new and returning players alike. I can't imagine why you'd play the second game without touching the first, but everything needed to inform or refresh your memory about the events in the previous game are all in the pause menu. Checking Adol's inventory shows that he has the 6 books of Ys on his person, which he can now read sans monocle. You can check Adol's notes to see that he already has a Rolodex filled with significant characters from the previous game. The twin goddesses, Goban and Jiba, Ludagema, Sarah, Dogi, and Darkfact are all here, acting as postcards from characters we may or may not be seeing in this game. Miss you already, big guy. There are also inclusions for each of the 6 priests, who we've only had a vague understanding about up until this point. Each priest was aligned with a specific magical affinity back in the day, with Priest Tova controlling power, Priest Abby controlling light, Priest Hadal controlling earth, Priest Mesa ruling over time, Priest Gemma domineering wisdom, how the wise have fallen to sleep and wound up in places they miraculously should be, and Priest Fact controlling spirit. If you haven't made the connection yet, Darkfact was actually the descendant of a priest with the same last name, but he was corrupted by darkness and transformed into a demon lord back in the first game. And that 6th book read at the end of the first game hinted at who may have goaded that development. Golden Wallbrooch. That's right. Ys 2 brings some quality of life improvements to its design since the first entry, while also dialing certain aspects down. In the first game, Adol could only carry 1 healing item at a time. Adol can now find healing herbs and apples out in the wild instead of having to buy 1 potion back at Ye Old Town. He can carry up to 3 herbs and 3 apples at a given time. He can also find Marley flowers, which will replenish his magic power, a new ability that will be introduced around midway through the first dungeon. The world design of Ys 2 is a bit structurally different from the previous game. Instead of having an open field map, there's a limited area before the game's first dungeon where you can explore a bit, and even forage for some consumables. But the game largely runs on a more linear path. If the first Ys was a world that you could get lost in that featured a mystery you needed to figure out, then Ys 2 is the clear and concise answer to the questions you were asking after defeating Darkfact. The first Ys involved getting to know each town, jumping in and out of dungeons with new quest-related items, all leading to a mega dungeon that crescendoed perfectly. Ys 2 is all of that, but it's more like a pilgrimage to the final destination, with less backtracking involved. The field map has been replaced with a mostly straightforward path containing some branches that don't veer too far off course. Dungeon progression still runs on the entire leave and come back blueprint with an overcorrection that is introduced around the game's midpoint dungeon. This overcorrection is probably for the best, but I did find it boring. The midpoint dungeon, we'll just call it one dungeon even though it's two distinct areas, is mostly linear with little variation as far as where you're supposed to go. This leg of the adventure still does some neat things, including one trick that expands the game in a way that's fascinating to reflect on. Adol will be given a new tool that makes for some interesting gameplay you wouldn't think possible for a game made in 1988, while also providing some necessary utility for the final dungeon. Ys 2 improves upon its battle system in several huge ways. The first is that Adol can now get to level 55 before the game ends, providing more increment to level progression that makes level grinding somehow more enjoyable than it already was. This can be experienced from the start when trying to get to level 2, which takes significantly less time to accomplish than it did in the first game. Adol has to start his progression from square one, and this debuff feels realistic. Getting teleported up to a mystical sky island and not sticking the landing left him bedridden for several days, and he's lucky he's not in a body cast. So sure, I accept the sequel debuff. Starting the game with 0 gold and none of your equipment from the first game, while having the 6 books of Ys, also helps reinforce that narrative harmony. All in all, it's a believable way for Adol to lose the power he had at the end of Ys 1. It's not a Super Metroid, God of War 2, or Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories magnitude of diegetically resetting a hero's power crawl, but the idea had to start somewhere, and I think Ys 2 does a decent job at paving the way for future games that later adopted the concept. Gaining your first few levels adds to the realism of everything that's come before the new battle system. The early combat is much more approachable this time around. It feels like even though Adol lost his might, he retained the technical know-how, and you can experience this during the demon encounters. Enemies now have less of a chance of button hooking when you attack them from behind. While still a risky move, Adol has a better chance at attacking foes from the front without fear of getting wrecked. Monsters will now flashily choreograph their attacks, almost as if Adol learned a battle tendency from all that time spent fighting in Ys 1. Diagonal attacks still retain more of an advantage and even feel like they can stun-lock enemies, so you'll want to prioritize lining up for these attacks if you can help it. And as you progress through the game, Adol will be given more tools to dismantle his foes, as hinted by the new MP meter located in the bottom of the HUD. Lance Village has a similar vibe to Barbado, but with more of a sky paradise feel to it, and a great attention to the small niceties. Check out this picture of 2 winged goddesses. Who could they be? The interior of each house in Lance is detailed with what you'd expect to find in a village that's been surrounded by clouds and non-violence for the last 700 years. They each have the coziness of a Victorian estate. No two houses are the same. Whether their fireplace or kitchen is in a different part of the house, their dining room tables are decorated with unique patterns, or their kitchens are filled with varied charcuterie. Oh yeah, the food sprites in this game are impressive. Anytime you walk into a home, there's a spread of food laid out as if the owner is expecting to entertain guests. Even the town jerk who directly tells Adol he likes privacy and not interacting with uncivilized ruffians has enough hors d'oeuvres to feed a family of 4 despite the solo wine glass showing you that he plans on sustaining only himself for at least a week before restocking the pantry. Wheels of cheese, grapes, plums, barrels full of oranges, and plump game birds can all be seated around any given home, and that wouldn't cover half of what's being eaten near its hearth. Fresh bread on tables, radishes, and russet potatoes stored in casks. A fresh fish ready to be filleted, with a mirepoix prep lying next to it. Meat links, onions, shallots, and tarragon all curing along the wall here. What are we making? Béarnaise sauce? Most of these homes actually come equipped with enough ingredients to make all 5 mother sauces. But all of Lance's homeowners are a kitchen union and a feasible Sky Island transportation method away from earning at least 2 Michelin stars. A stroll around Lance shows that the village is mostly peaceful. If you can ignore the occasional nightmarish wails people keep hearing below it. But no need to worry about things we can't see just yet. I know it's on everyone's minds, so yes, there are Pickards here, and no, we can't make them explode into their offspring in this game. They're shepherded by an adorable girl with a lisp. Pickards, they're cute. Their increase in quantity communicates the passage of in-game time. With a reproductive rate like that, thank God we never have to answer the question, would you rather fight 100 horse-sized Pickards or 1,000 Pickard-sized horses? Lance Village has a bulletin board to make you aware of side quests that can be performed. At the current moment, the town is in dire need of iron ore, which would make several recently unemployed and purpose-lacking individuals in this town whose only desire is to make the finest equipment very happy, but also their family members.
All he does now is wander the village like a loon.
Yes, I witnessed your father having the same conversation with himself 5 times about how Pickards don't make for good crafting materials just now. We make our way to Dr. Flair's clinic, but he's not around. Leonor's just received a carrier pigeon from the doctor saying that he's been trapped in Rustini Mine due to a cave-in, with no hope of escape. So it's time to put our hero pants on. The way forward can only be forged by finding the Lost Doctor, because we need to cure Lilia's surprise disease no one knows the name of, and because I tried leaving for the next destination and realized I couldn't, so I guess I'm stuck here. The 300 gold you get from engaging with the clinic to start the main quest is just enough to purchase our trusty old friend, the short sword. And by trusty old friend, I mean this metal companion has been stained with the blood of hundreds of my enemies. In addition to the armory, the only other shop that can be visited is Jade's Oddities, which is the place to go for consumables. You only really need to come to Jade's for wing items, but as you'll see, those will quickly become useless. Later on, when you have enough cheese, you can purchase Jade's Pride and Joy, the only elixir in this game. The elixir acts as a full life spell when equipped, reviving Adol with full HP and MP if he dies. That would have been nice to have at the top of Darm Tower. As fun as it was to be swordless for 2 hours in the first game, it's nice to have access to equipment from the get-go this time around. Before going to the ruins of Mundoria, we have to stop and talk to Elder Cornell. Getting his permission to enter the dungeon might act as a weapon check. I'm not sure because I had the short sword before meeting him. But Elder Cornell is a man who knows a lot about a lot. He's a good guy to come back and visit for some lore exposition from time to time. This is hinted in his first dialogue when he says he saw a pair of young girls near the ruins who looked just like the goddesses, and who suddenly disappeared. While it's no secret he's talking about Fina and Rhea, this is a good way to remind you of these characters, considering Adol's last thoughts were about Fina before departing to Ys at the end of the first game. It also plays on the mysteries that were introduced in the first game, except we know who Elder Cornell's talking about, instead of trying to pinpoint their identity like we had to with Dark Fact. Elder Cornell also tells Adol that possessing the Books of Ys is an ancient endorsement from the priests who wrote them, and he should search for each priest's statue to return the books in the inner sanctum of the Iron Mine, which is called the Sanctuary of Toll. Near the entrance of the ruins, you can mine consumables as well as visit Lilia, who's located at the cliff near where she found Adol at the beginning of the game. Diegetically, she'll tell Adol how she loves Marley flowers and how there's something magical about them that just fills her with energy. That's a nice way of keeping the immersion without telling you how magic works. You can also trigger a cutscene to see your next and final destinations, the icy and perilous Ridge of Noltea, as well as Solomon's Shrine, which was attached to the first dungeon from the first game before the Ancient Cataclysm. While there aren't as many of them in the second entry, both Ys games are good about giving you places to stop at and hang out. Later in this game, we'll see my all-time favorite place from both games, but the scenic points you discover in these games are great at providing a sense of scale to your grand adventure through Asteria and the mythical kingdom of Ys. The first Ys gave you a look at Darm Tower less than an hour into playing to ponder the island's mysteries and final destination. Midway and during the end of that journey, you could see the depths of Rast and Mine to help you fathom how big the crest of Bag-U Beded was. You could stop and look at the inside of Bag-U Beded en route to the Thieves' Den to observe what a 700-year-old magical healed wound looked like. There was the Wait and Heal Darm Tower balcony view, which gradually scaled down the higher you climbed, showing more and more of Asteria as the sun was setting, while informing you that the final dungeon felt like one epic 24-hour heist mission. You already know how I feel about those moons. Great view. And now you can see the final destination of Ys 2, Solomon's Shrine proper. But if you walk back to where Lilia found Adol or at the balcony of a future location, you can see a lot of the areas from the previous adventure to reignite some fond memories. At the ruins of Mundoria, we see Astel and Legs. These guys share a house, as well as a fascination for the ruins. The two spend their days hanging out at the ruins and then crash and lance, and do it all over again at sunrise. Considering that one of my only real-life friends for a time was a man in his 60s, I can relate to this dynamic. I'm like Astel in this instance. I stay in the same corner every day, but I puppy dog my PC instead of the entrance to explorable ruins filled with cool things and ugly creatures. Wait, maybe those two things are the same. You can tell Astel that Elder Cornell gave you permission to enter the ruins, and he just believes you. I take that as a reflection of Lance Village. In a denizen's words, being a veritable paradise. The village is high trust, and it reminds me of where I'm from. I have this theory about the Midwest being friendlier than the coasts because it's an area that has to survive the harsh winter for at least 6 months every year. It's a dynamic that forces strangers to rely on each other and invest in their communities. A Sky Island community is no different, even if the weather is. Sure, the Land of Ys probably gets snowstorms, and that brings people together. These people make hearty meals meant to be shared, which is quintessential Midwest. But have you ever seen skylightning and thought, I wonder what it's like up there? Lance Village probably has the answer to that question, which you could drum up as majestically deadly. I was bummed when I first learned that Lance didn't have a tavern, a place full of interesting characters to kick back some loggers and tap into the heart of where you're at. But you have an interaction like this after encountering mostly everyone back in town, and you realize that Lance is the tavern. Legs is over on the ruins outskirts, hanging out next to a goddess statue. There's an alcove just before him that's being guarded by some golems we can't damage just yet, so we'll avoid them for now. My name, believe it or not, is Legs. I don't know why he sounds like Sean Connery, but you can call me Legman if you show desire. I do desire this. The old man has a task for us, but notices that we're too weak. So it's off to grinding around the ruins and inside the dungeon. The first dungeon of East 2 has a Rastin-Mine face with a Dharm skeleton. Gross man-eating worms, ectoplasmic mollusks commandeering headless armor, tentacular tentacles. It's all here. This area doesn't feel as scary as Rastin-Mine, but the game throws its difficulty at you like it knows you're playing a sequel. As for the Dharm bones, tunnels. Tunnels everywhere. Passageways lead to forks, which lead to crossroads, which lead to more forks, leaving you with making a binary choice of where to go, but also being pained with trying to remember where you just entered from. You could use a guide to navigate this dungeon, and you'd still get lost. And I'm speaking from experience. I eventually had to read one for this place. As we discussed previously, your goals are to return all 6 books of East to their rightful statues, as well as find Dr. Flare. The first leg of the dungeon throws some softballs at you if you can get past its hard blows. And you don't mistake a statue chamber for a boss door and walk past it to explore, and then get sent down tunnel hell. Seriously, you can't tell which stairs lead up or down in this place, which makes it so much worse. It's almost as if Rustini was designed to make you doubt your navigation skills, but there are contrasting areas and stairwells lined with stone pillars that'll lead you to a statue in need of an ancient tome. The statue rooms are a nice break from the action. Each statue area's music takes a sharp change to clue you in on their safety. Each priest's room triggers a scene of a book levitating out of Adol's pocket as the statue gives you some brief lore and then replenishes all of Adol's HP and MP. The dialogue provided by each statue acts as expositional moments for Adol and the player to learn about ancient history, what each priest did during their lifetime, or even long-term goals like the statue of Adol telling you that the Master of Demons resides in Solomon's Shrine. Like all dungeons, there's no wait and heal feature once inside the crypts. You're expected to overcome what you can and make a strategic exit when you can, and saving repetitively if you want to continue crawling further into its depths. You may even want to grind up to level 4 in the outdoor ruins before ever entering, to save yourself from getting wrecked on the dungeon's first floor. But the statue rooms act like inns, so you don't always have to leave Rustini if you can memorize where they are. Inside the dungeon, you'll eventually find more reasons to head back to Lance Village, with one notable reason being the acquisition of iron ore. Being faced with the choice of turning around and exploring further is enticing. On one hand, I don't have to deal with constantly getting lost if I can find my way out of this place. I could probably save poor Laszlo from his wife and son abandoning him if I can make it back to Lance with an iron ore. Get some nice newly smithed gear while I'm at it. On the other hand, I'm curious to see what this dungeon has to offer. Madness and death, I tell you. You can find the first boss about midway through the dungeon after much trial and error via the stairwell maze. When I got to Velagundr, I thought I was going into another statue room. Well played, Falcom. I have no idea if this was a feature in the first game, but I immediately 180'd out of the room by accident. This was one of the better accidents that happened to me, considering I hadn't saved my game in an hour. One of the not-so-great accidents was finding the Madoc, but we'll get to that. That's what I had to use a guide for. Having the foresight to save before fighting Velagundr was a godsend because blades won't damage him. In fact, swords don't work on almost all of the bosses in this game. Instead, you have to use fire magic, which we haven't found yet. And this is the first legitimate reason to leave Rustini. After some more trial and error through the Lost Mines, I eventually found the fire magic, but Adol didn't have any magic power to be able to use it. After spending some time grinding past level 4, if you head toward the goddess statue at the ruins of Mundoria, Adol's level will be high enough to damage the golems. This is a reiteration of a teaching moment from the last game, showing you that if Adol's level is high enough or he has good enough equipment, his damage output can now thwart once invincible foes. This lack of damage also happened at the beginning of Rustini. I was barely doing any damage to the monsters after entering, but after some quick grinding I could dispatch these nasties in 2 to 4 hits. Later on, leveling up will also increase Adol's magical damage, which is useful to remember with some of the game's more difficult bosses. Killing the golems gains access to a treasure chest containing the Rod of Divinity, which is what Legman was going to task us with obtaining once we were strong enough. And now that we have the Rod of Divinity, we need to touch the goddess statue with it to be blessed with the gift of magic. After tapping the goddesses with my divine rod, I meant that platonically, I'm now imbued with magic, and it's time to go back and fight the first boss, if I can find him again. I also went back to town to check on the Pickard count, and Lucy, the little girl with the lisp, will actually tell you the count, which also means there's new dialogue options with villagers. With enough gold to purchase some armor, going back to Guido's armory doesn't disappoint. Have a look around. Surround yourself in the opulence of my stock and imagine Would if they were yours. Guido, I don't care if you're the only armory until the endgame. With a sales pitch like that, you've made a patron out of me. Velagander is an improvement from the first boss in East 1, whose strategy consisted of run into this guy 3 or 4 times while avoiding flamethrowers. Scratch that, he's more complex than every boss in the first game with the exception of Darkfact. So in terms of what can be expected from bosses in East 2, he sets a precedent I'm looking forward to. As I said earlier, you can only damage Velagander using fire magic. He moves horizontally while following Adol, shooting 7 energy beams per discharge back-to-back at our hero. Vel's offense also varies from wide attacks that can be weaved into with some narrow attacks thrown in to keep you on your toes. You can't damage the boss when his arms are in front of his torso and eye. If you continue to shoot at him while his arms are blocking his weak point, they'll remain blocking his weak point. I did find out by watching someone else's footage that you can eventually destroy his arms, but I was unaware of that while fighting him. You have to bait Vel by facing opposite of him, kiting the boss toward Adol, and then facing him and going Flower Power Mario on him as fast as your thumb can press the magic button. It's kind of annoying at times because you have to line up perfectly in order to achieve a hit while dodging his incoming attacks. Hit an arm and it's back to blocking the weak points. But if you can keep yourself from tilting, you'll eventually beat him. This battle teaches that the magic meter is a fairly forgiving resource. Each time you use your magic meter when it's full, your total available MP depletes by 1. You'll want to fire off as many magic attacks per use of a full magic meter in order to use it as effectively as possible. Of course, before all boss fights, you'll also want to make sure that your magic is fully charged, so you can expend as many spells as possible. In this way, this discourages first-time players from expending magic, knowing they'll need it as a resource for an impending boss battle. But all in all, it's a test of patience with Velagander, and I'm a patient man. The first boss defeated, we venture into the dungeon's darker territories, on the lookout for the last few statue chambers and Dr. Flare. Unless you forgot to save and you die. Looks like it's back to my darn ways. I didn't make any promises about not continuing this pun for the second game. After beating Velagander a second time, we enter the Sanctuary of Toll's darkest depths, which is filled with more grotesque creatures. Big purple mouths with talons for feet, male gorgons, and the headless, slime-commandeered armors with shields that have faces are all ready to take a chunk out of you if given the opportunity. Fire magic doesn't really seem to do much damage here, or at least to the armors when they're facing you, so I gave up on that pretty quickly. I really didn't find magic to be all that effective in this game, but I could have been using it wrong. In fact, later on I find out I know I was using it wrong. I can't shake the feeling that the fire magic is a tool mainly used for boss fights, which is a bit frustrating, but luckily the bump system is addictively fun. This area offers the iron ore, which will be great for leveling the playing field on enemies down here. As of right now, ramming into each headless armor feels like an intro to Yu-Gi-Oh!
It's time to do.
Down here, we also find the Salsetta flower, which will tempt you to use it for its elixir qualities, but you should avoid that temptation if you can help it. The light magic spell is in this area as well. Light magic reveals secret entrances that are telegraphed by slight white colored ripples in darker areas. Finding one of these nearby illusory walls will lead you to the Evil Bell, which is what's emitting the sinister chime that several villagers of Lance said they could hear however many hundreds of feet above where the dungeon is. Pretty gnarly. Look at the design on that thing. Nothing like half a humanoid skull having its eyes and maxillary jaw clutched onto by a severed scaly red claw. That's what I always say. That's what I said once. Just now. This leads us to my biggest complaint about Rustini Mine. The Matic. Raise your hand if you're today years old when you learned that that was a synonym for pickaxe. At this point in the dungeon, I'm at 5 books returned and still no Dr. Flare. The Matic was one of the first items I found in Rustini, and I'm supposed to use it somewhere. Eventually. So I do some backtracking because I still need to find the Chamber of Priest Fact. I'm quadruple checking everywhere I've been, thinking that I somehow missed Priest Fact's chamber. Maybe it was connected to an area near another priest's chamber, like with 4 of the other statue chambers I found. Which is fine because spending enough time in Rustini gave me some bearings on how to circumvent the riffraff. But these stairwells, man, they transformed this dungeon from funhouse to clown college. Saying this place operated like Darm Tower was an understatement. It's really the shifting entries and exits. When the game gives you an essential item like the Matic, and you instantaneously forget where you found it, and there are no places that even somewhat visually indicate where to use that Matic, so much so that looking at a guide from front to back gets you even more lost. Well, it's an issue worthy of venting. Go to the area where the Puroid is? What the fuck's a Puroid? Oh, that's the crab xenomorph. Why didn't you say that? Too bad there's about 10 different places a Puroid can be. But the one good thing about leaving a dungeon that only gets more confusing the more I delve into it is that I can return the iron ore to upgrade my equipment and give poor Laszlo a new lease on life, crafting new armor for me. Yes, Wiz. Help Laszlo.
Before you become Laszlo.
With all these new boons and evidence of a cave-in nowhere to be found, despite my numerous attempts, trust me, there were many, we put finding Dr. Flare on pause to go back to Lance for some much-needed upgrades and new conversation. Of course, I'm gonna soak in some hysteria by the cliff to recharge from all of that backtracking you didn't have to experience firsthand. Selling the iron ore nets us 3,000 gold, effectively doubling what I exited Rustini with. I skip the longsword and go straight for the demon jugular by spending all of my earnings on the Tawar. Lily is talking about being exhausted, and I know her disease is taking its toll. God is my witness. I would have found Dr. Flare an hour and a half ago if I knew where to use this pickaxe, homie. With the iron ore acquired, the bulletin board has updated us with an urgent new quest, and it's from Lance's least desirable villager, Gila. I guess he wants us to hunt demons in his basement, which was locked up until now. I'd be lying if I wasn't a bit curious to see how this plays out.
Aren't you that adventure guy who was resting up over at Benoa's?
Yeah.
Aren't you the same douche lord I met 2 hours ago?
Looks like Gila's not too proud to ask us to suss out demons from his basement. It's funny how his tune changes when he needs something from the Skyfaring Ingrate. His smarmy request is on par with the smug behavior displayed when I first met him. Adol's notes on Gila has a footnote saying, greatly enjoys poetry. Yeah, I knew guys like you in college. Emphasis on the past tense there. Using the evil bell in Gila's basement makes his wall go full dogie, and all of the worst creatures from Rustini Mine start pouring out. Is this prick's basement the 9th circle of hell? Based on the guy's attitude, though. Is anyone really that shocked? I get a game over and decide I should probably wait and come back here. If you go and talk to Elder Cornell, he'll tell you that Priest Fact's chamber could be right under our feet, which means Gila's basement probably contains it, so we can file that away for now. A guy like Gila deserves to squirm. On today's episode of Dear God, Will We Ever Find Dr. Flare? I decide to spend 10 minutes in the darkest corner I can find to accurately reflect the mood I'm in as I brood over a guide, trying to find a doctor who can somehow get carrier pigeons through removable boulders. Alright, we finally found a Puroid. A better sign than any. Let me just resort to the guide for another 10 minutes. After consulting some generous online stranger from over a decade ago, I start using the Matic at places that look like wreckages, but I come up dry. Here's the boss door I passed 14 times this visit. Okay, another Puroid. Let's try the Matic here, and nada. At this point, I'm convinced Dr. Flare doesn't deserve to live for getting himself into this mess. You can't see me consulting the guide for the 36th time here because I managed to disappear without a trace. Yep, you won't find a single distinguishable clue that I'm currently in this godforsaken mine. Like Dr. Flare! Let's try this again. Puroid. Check. Barely visible path full of hopelessness and devoid of visual cues. Check. Dr. Flare? Get bent loser. You see this Puroid right here? I've accidentally visited and killed this Puroid more times than I've died to Dark Fact. Think about that. Here's a nice multi-floored area of the dungeon full of Puroids to keep me extra confused. By Jove, I found it. How anyone is supposed to find this area on their first playthrough of this game is beyond me.
Has someone come to rescue me? You're not a demon, I hope.
I'm gonna be honest, Doc. Lily is probably dead at this point, and if she's not, well, she's going to be. Because I feel like locking you in Gila's basement right about now. Speaking with Dr. Flare, he reveals that he needs a rota fruit and a salsetta flower to make a remedy for Lilia. Buddy, I found those hours ago. 3 Pickards have been born since I started looking for you. There's a rota fruit that respawns in the same area of Moondoria ruins. I obviously had plenty of time on my hands to be aimless and find it. And the only salsetta flower that you can get right now is in the deepest section of the Sanctuary of Toll, where we found the iron ore, the light magic, and the demon bell. So I'm way ahead of Doc here.
You might find some salsetta flower deeper in the mine, but this is as deep as I'd ever dare go. I'm no warrior.
Well, you're not exactly a spelunker either. Yet here you are. Safe to say, after that debacle, I've decided to invest in purchasing a wing for easy dungeon exits. Over at the clinic, Leonor says he'd like to give us something for finding his lost brother. And he means that quite literally because he can't give me anything. So he offers his devotion instead, which made me laugh, so I'll take it. Raw Family Wellness finally has its doctor back, as well as an updated character portrait. We get Lilia's medicine, and Flare has the gall to tell me not to dilly-dally and deliver it to Benoa. That's rich. Now saved, Lilia thanks Adol for risking his life to cure her from a disease she didn't even know she had. And that's good enough for me given all the trouble I went through. We don't have to tell her how much of a nightmare it was. But no good deed truly goes unpunished. Finishing this quest will give Adol experience. The same thing actually happened when we delivered the iron ore, but I didn't notice it because I didn't level up when it happened. But Noah will also give Adol return magic, which lets you teleport around east to any checkpoint that you found, which is great. But also, I just wasted 300 gold on a wing less than 5 minutes ago. Lilia reminds Adol that Gila's basement still needs to be dealt with, and I agree. But I wanted to drag my feet, so I went and checked on Lucy tending to the Pickards, who told me that she decided to name the 10th pup Adol, which is just like the injection of pleasantness I need before revisiting Gila. I'm not crying. You're crying. So we're back at Gila's. The game does give you the option to reject his request to hunt the basement demons, which feels pretty satisfying, even if it's an illusion and you have to say yes, if you want the game's story to move forward. Oh Gila, the game's basically enabling your crummy behavior right now, but I want you to know that it feels nice having your stones in a vice grip, if only for a moment. After another wall break and a monster mash, we finally find the last statue chamber, which belongs to Priest Fact, Dark's ancestor. The statue tells us, the demon's strength grows daily, and soon, the powers we've been granted will be no more. They still function by the grace and protection of the goddesses, but their time grows to a close, bit by bit. If the demons are not stopped, their reign of chaos and destruction shall expand and consume the world entire. But you, warrior, may yet bring peace. Solomon Shrine hides the source of all. Go there and put an end to he who governs this evil. A relic exists, granted by the goddesses. It is known as the Scroll of Guidance. It is merely blank paper, but open it before the statues, and you will be told what you must do. Scroll of Guidance acquired, it's time to visit Legman one last time before departing towards Solomon Shrine proper. But you can also visit Lance for updated villager dialogue should you desire it. Laszlo has rediscovered his purpose and now sounds like he's been talking to Guido.
Take a look around. Bask in the glow of my quality smithing.
Legman gives us some words that sound perfect with the rock ballad playing in the background about how we should celebrate our victories, but never let them make us complacent. Steel your courage and prepare to face the truth of the world. Your path will surely become clear. It's mighty inspiring. The goddess statue tells us that the priests endorsed a warrior all those 700 years ago, and to use the Scroll of Guidance at other statues like it for further direction. Pretty standard fare. With the last statue discovered, the path leading to Solomon Shrine is now open and we can leave Lance. In between destinations, we're greeted by the same ominous pair from the game's beginning. But this time, it's only the cowled man who speaks. He'd been watching Adol this whole time and seems to be sacrificing people using some sort of ritual that involves ringing a bell. It's satisfying enough to get some intermittent story beats like these, the B plot to my current A plot adventure, given that what we're about to sift through is probably the weakest portion of the duology.
It's easier to talk about the upcoming 2 areas with broader strokes, so that's how we'll approach this next leg in Adol's journey. These areas are like the work week. They're inevitable, you've got to get through them, and at times, you have to drink some coffee to summon the energy required to get through them. Adol must climb the peak leading to Solomon Shrine, an area that was forged by magic as an added layer of protection for Ys's once sovereign sanctuary. This involves climbing the game's snowy cliffs, called the Ridge of Nultia, as well as circumventing the mountain's violent, magma-pooled caves. These are the game's next 2 dungeons, if we can even call them that. They're practically straight lines with hidden progression necessary items baked into their less beaten paths. What these dungeons lack in rigor, they make up in spectacle, while finding ways to keep things somewhat interesting. Their simpler designs make sense, given that Rastini and Dharm Tower before it were both an ordeal and a half. But it also feels like a huge overcorrection to the point where these areas feel mundane and rely off of their elemental affinities. In all fairness, 4 immersive dungeons into 2 entire games is a pretty generous experience to partake in before the duology throws its more lackluster stuff at you. So kudos to Falcom for that. Everything up until this point has been a steady rise in enjoyment. There were bound to be some slumps, and these dungeons had to pay the price. The Ridge of Nultia is like the board game Chutes and Ladders, but fun. Now that probably sounds contradictory given everything I've just said, but have you ever played Chutes and Ladders? There's only one direction to go after sitting through 10 of the longest minutes of your life, and it's toward the trash. The bump system and limited exploration throw the team on their shoulders in these areas, and power progression can make you forget about where the level design is lacking. You have these slopes that you can't ascend without acquiring the stone shoes, which act as the chutes. The stairwells are like ladders. And of course, the fun is killing demons. What's going on with this ice shrimp's anatomy here? I'm not even concerned that this guy can levitate. How does this thing eat? The fun is also finding items that provide quality of life improvements, in addition to straight up trickery. There's a well-placed hidden cave about midway through the Ridge of Nultia containing the Spirit Cape. which acts as East 2's version of the healing ring. Yes, wait and heal makes a comeback in full force, and it's going to be necessary for the leaps in enemy damage output. I like the intentional design for this nook. The developers were descriptive by placing an enemy near it that you'll probably want to kill for experience. But also, look at these footprints that disappear into the ice wall. That is a nice touch. The magma area is called Burned Bless, which is officially the coolest name for a lava level these eyes have ever seen. Too bad its mechanics are not as cool, but what can you do in a place that's so hot? I will say that I do like the enemies here. They're pretty on theme with the whole prehistoric vibe. You've got protoceratops, saber-toothed walruses, armadillos with tusks, reptoid men with stealth camouflage magic. The gang's all here. Actually, all of the monsters in this game are relatively location accurate. Creepy things are in the mines, the mountain goats are on the mountain, Magma Man wants to give me a hug. Burned Bless arguably has a more linear progression than the Ridge of Noltea, and it spices things up with a new village filled with some mystery, as well as a not-so-fun escort mission. In Burned Bless, there's no more than 3 areas you can veer off to, and progression is locked by a deadly poison fog until you can figure out how to get past it. I will praise East 2 for throwing a town into the middle of the dungeon. That's a welcome curveball. This village is called Colony of Lava. Creative. You can sense that something's off in Colony of Lava with how each villager responds to Adol, and it's your job to get to the bottom of things. Outside of its herd of Pickards, Colony of Lava's only friendly presence is a fellow named Carson, who's obsessed with taking frequent trips to the area near the Ridge of Noltea's exit so he can cool off from all the heat that's surrounding him. As much as I love saunas and fires, I can't blame the guy for wanting to get away from the constant molten burst every now and then. But yeah, Carson's infrequent tenure at the village means he's out of the loop, and doesn't treat you with the same contempt, fear, and scorn felt by the rest of the town. Colony of Lava's bulletin board warns to never venture outside for fear of the recent increasing demon presence, and for people to keep their children close. And the villagers have a great way of emphasizing the sentiment when Adol interacts with them. A lot of times, their responses will be limited to dramatic ellipses, if not outright rage or anxiety. Even this kid, who you'd think would be friendly, maintains the cold shoulder uncharacteristic of a place surrounded by so much warmth. This is Isked. The pronunciation of his name is as hard as he's pretending to be. And on first impression, well, my headcanon is that his response is overcompensating for the fact that he still wets the bed. He's one rat tail haircut away from growing up to be a scumbag. My favorite response to Adol's presence in the village is from Nash, who LARPs as an answering machine. I, not here right now. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. He's physically here, he's mentally elsewhere. He's not fooling me. He still gets a gold star for making me wish I could use the same response in real life sometimes. Not to get too tangential here, but I accidentally launched a fireball at No8 by pressing the confirmation button on my controller. Apparently, 12 hours spent with this series still leaves me puzzled at its classical Japanese button layout. Which is really just a different answer to the question, do you press circle on the PlayStation controller instead of X to confirm? What can I say? Old habits die hard. I still type hunt and peck style on my keyboard because I couldn't be bothered to form the dexterity and muscle memory while playing Mavis Beacon teaches typing during my computer classes. If that tells you anything. Maybe someday a certain game will change that. So, No8 responds to my blunder with, "You wanna dance, little man?" Not in the literal sense though, more like the West Side Story sense. This was a long-winded way of telling you that I'm so impressed with this series that I purchased pretty much every single East game available on Steam. So I'd say accidentally sending Know It was the best $100 mistake I've made in months. Eventually, we make our way to Ruba, the guard manning the bridge that will lead us out of Burned Bless. But Ruba makes some half-hearted excuse that the drawbridge's winch is jammed, and we won't be able to leave town, effectively trapping Adol here. And this is where what I consider to be probably the best mechanic in the first 2 East games comes into play. On the Ridge of Noltea, you'll find Adol's next spell, Alter. True to its name, this magic will alter Adol's appearance, turning him into a Rue, which is a species that were favored by the goddesses before all of the events that happened in the ancient past. The lore goes that the Rues were changed into demons post-disaster, yet were still favored. So they just developed little antelope horns, but kept their cute kangaroo appearances. Basically, they're anti-demons. Anyway, this spell is from the Gemma lineage, which preached that demons are a consequence of magic, but their presence makes them pitiable creatures whose existence is dictated by their appearance. And if you could only talk to them, perhaps they would have a way of subverting your expectations in a positive manner. Turning into a Rue lets you talk with demons. So if you missed the hidden cave containing the Spirit Cape at the Ridge of Noltea, talking to the demon positioned near the cave will reveal that there's an entrance next to him. Conversing with demons is highly entertaining. Sometimes they'll have interesting hints to give you. Other times they'll blurt out something that's random, but usually funny. Almost always, they'll have a name that tells me that the localization team over at Xseed was having a good time. Chubby Yupe, Gerlax, and Tex-Mex are just a few examples of these names. Based on what I've experienced, Tex-Mex is the most common demon name in East 2, which is funny because we'll eventually find out that the man in the black cape who's been watching Adol this whole time is named Dallas. The reference is not lost on me, Xseed. Once you get the altar magic, it's pretty essential to progression for the rest of the game. I personally like to perform what I call the Rue bait and switch, which boils down to talk to demon, get necessary information, wait for his guard to go down, and obliterate him for ever trusting me in the first place. It's also pretty funny when the demons are attacking you and you just turn Rue to get out of it. They all pretend like they weren't attacking at all 2 seconds ago. Turning Rue will provide you some well-placed clues to give you some bearing on what to do next, like finding an anti-illusion mirror, which is needed to get through the Ridge of Noltea. And altar magic is what's going to help us progress through Burnt Bless. I do find it amazing that this game effectively doubled its dialogue with this one trick. It provides responses for all demons, and even generates new responses from each NPC when Adol interacts with them as a Rue, which would have been monumental for a game made in 1988. Interacting with the Colony of Lava as a Rue leads to the general response of,
"Oh my goddess, a Rue. Begging your pardon, my liege. We don't want any trouble."
Ever predictable, Iskt responds by posing as a tough guy, convincing me that his name is shorthand for ischemic stroke. Our disguise works, and Ruba spills the beans about not letting Adol pass. We catch him in the act, and we get treated to a flashback of Dallas capturing Ruba's son, Tarf, who he's holding as a hostage in exchange for Ruba's compliance toward not letting Adol pass through town. So we're off to save Tarf. Somehow. We still need to get past the poison fog. The boss fights at the end of each dungeon, once again, involve magic as the only point of attack, but in different ways. The Ridge of Noltea's boss is Tealmeth, which, in hindsight, sounds like some fairy dust you should probably stay away from. I mean, look at the results. Cyclops eye, goblinized ears, exoskeleton made of stone. Everything he touches turns to ice. Just say no if the Jazz Cabbage Gnome ever offers, kids. Tilemeth, will try to jump on Adol's last position before he leaps. You'll want to move from that spot if you want to avoid getting served to the hungry demons out on the Ridge of Noltea as an Adol pancake. When Tilemeth lands, he'll send out ice pillars in, at most, 8 directions. Kind of like one big snowflake that wants to kill you. Sometimes, the ice pillar paths will conjoin, creating a consolidated path of diamond dust that requires Adol to take a wider berth in order to avoid them. The trick to defeating Tilemeth is to constantly move, positioning Adol far enough away, while immediately turning him 180 degrees to bust out as many fireballs as possible once the boss lands, and before he shoots the ice pillars at you. Adol can't damage Tilemeth when he's attacking. Tilemeth also seems to jump consecutively at random, compelling a response that's tantamount to move or die immediately. Having the Hawk Idol is meant for this battle, since the Spirit Cape most likely won't work, and since this boss won't allow you enough time to stand still and heal. While intended, the Hawk Idol isn't a must, but having to perfectly face the direction of the boss after running away from the cryo explosion can be tedious, when the difference between damaging him is 30 to 60 frames. The guy took a page out of Bat Dad's book. Let's talk about that Burned Bless boss.
Sweet mother of all things horrific.
Mandibles for teeth, a missing nose, and bloodshot map markers for eyes. Hooks covering his face, like whatever fifth-dimensional prison he was being held at couldn't even contain him. What created this abomination? Where's the rest of his body? He uses severed neck flaps for limbs like some sort of grotesque beached cephalopod that should be thrown back into whatever horrible geographically isolated lake he belongs to. Which, in his case, is probably whatever this world's version of Mount Vesuvius is. This is the game's most ridiculous boss battle, if the head slowly following you and spitting out a whole jejunum didn't indicate as much. There's talking out of your butt, and here and now, we see what attacking out of it looks like too. Greetings from Jalaldi. Like the previous bosses, you have to goad Jalaldi into position so that you can damage him at his most vulnerable, when he's swallowing the entrails he just vomited that are trying to flatten you. What this battle lacks in engagement, it makes up for in tension and atmosphere. The arena is surrounded by magma that boils over. The area in which Adol can move is limited, so his movement has to be more intentional. There's a lot of friction for what, up until this point in the game, is the slowest boss we've seen in this duology. The window to damage Jalaldi is extremely limited, and sometimes the flesh serpent gets in the way, forcing you to have to wait another 30 seconds for the next opportunity. This boss fight is tedious. It's a battle that could take what feels like 10 minutes if you're careless, a war of attrition between your patience and Jalaldi's tenacity. So it's best to not play on tilt, despite the frustration. Whatever you do, you don't want to get stuck on the Magma Land Bridge. That's an automatic restart, whether the flesh serpent is steamrolling you because you have nowhere else to go, or it's about to do exactly that and you have to flee the boss room. The trick to Jalaldi is to kite him toward the top of the stage. Once he attacks, the battle turns into a game of Snake. You can tort the... Gosh, there are only so many names synonymous with the term flesh serpent. You can tort the thing around as it follows you while trying to keep Jalaldi in the top half of his arena so that you have a good angle of attack. But you'll also want to keep the boss in the top hemisphere of the space while keeping in mind that he moves at the pace of an inchworm. He moves exponentially faster downstream in the arena than he does upstream. After some trial and error, it's pretty rinse, wash, and repeat. Jalaldi starts birthing enemies once he gets below half health, but they're not really a threat when the boss is typically blocking their attacks. Jalaldi's head exploding feels especially cathartic this time around compared to the other bosses, but not in the I overcame Dark Fact despite the odds kind of way. More like the dear God please let this be over kind of way. Also, I found out after watching other people fight this boss that Adol has a charged magic attack, which I never used during my playthrough, so I'm sure that would have cleaved this fight's duration in half. Hindsight's 2020. Before all of this business with the decapitated head, we had to turn Rue to find a way past the poison fog to save Tarf. This leads us to one of the more charming locations of the game, Rue Nest. As the name implies, this hidden cove is full of Rues, and they double down on the cuteness by having all of their names containing the word Rue. We were driven out of our homes by warmongering demons and forced to hide here. Ours is a peace-loving clan. Peace, love, sleep, food, and information. This guy speaks how I imagine my cat would. I love these guys. Once you're done kicking it with the friendly monsters, you'll get a rotoleaf which can be used as a magical respirator through the poison fog. Past the fog, we can find a crack in a wall. Looks like the developers took notes from Rustini because we can actually see it this time around. Using an item called Whisper Earrings, we hear a boy's voice beyond the crevice. It's Tarf. He's being held captive with a guy named Keith, and my mind's eye is picturing a man well into his 40s. I can't imagine a guy named Keith who's under the age of 40, just like I can't imagine a Kyle who's under the age of 30. Different decades had different popular names, and these were certainly two of them. Tarf sends you on a fetch quest for an item called the Black Pearl, which Keith needs. And this brings us to the only other area of Burned Bless we haven't discovered yet. I've seen Indiana Jones enough times to do a save before the inevitable trap, and sure enough, the trap's there. I make my way back after the ambush. The Black Pearl in his possession, Tarf hands the powerful item over to Keith, who then warns Tarf to warn us to get back. And Tarf says, "He's gonna do something!" And I'm anticipating a wall explosion, which I've only ever associated with the dearly missed Dogi, so I'm excited to meet Keith. The wall does explode, and it looks like Keith is going the opposite direction, because we only see a demon exiting. We find out that Keith is that demon, and it turns out he can speak human and was locked in the cell with Tarf. But when handed the Black Pearl, Keith turned vicious, and that's what caused the explosion, yada yada yada. He walked away, we'll come back to him later. Escorting Tarf back is frustrating, but understandable. He's a kid who's been starving for the last 2 days, so you can kind of mind his turtle dawdling. Dallas promising Ruba to keep Tarf safe was a total lie, which means that he was going to let Tarf die regardless of Adol's passage through Colony of Lava. Pretty sinister. But when it comes to escorting the little guy, I've had more fun watching paint dry. If you leave Tarf alone for barely 5 seconds, he will die. Demons just start dogpiling out of nowhere, so you have to pay constant attention to him. If you can handle the frustrating few minutes of escorting Tarf somewhere and then he tells you matter-of-factly that you went the wrong way, then you can tolerate the next few grueling minutes taking him the correct way back to Colony of Lava. Tarf has a character portrait, which is this game's way of telling you he's important. I'm not going to question how at this point. It's fairly obvious that each priest from 700 years ago has a distant relative who exists now. It's just that a lot of the characters in East 2 aren't as exciting as the characters from the first game. Maybe it's me playing 2 games back to back, but I don't think I'm wrong here. Lilia was one of the more popular characters in Japan when the game first released, which I'm convinced had more to do with her blinking animation, which would have been revolutionary at the time. It's very Death Trap too. But also maybe her popularity is owed to the fact that you can actually save her from impending doom, unlike Sarah the Fortune Teller. I will say that Keith held promise from the moment I saw him, but maybe I'm more captivated by the mystery surrounding him, which seeped out of the first game in spades. I'd also be lying if I said I wasn't chasing the Dogi Dragon in this game. If a wall explodes, you've got my attention. But, you know, what's this dude have to offer? You're a guard and you had a dream about the goddesses? You and about 10 other people in this game, bub. I'm being facetious. This guy does offer some decent backstory, which we'll get to eventually. Once Tarf is back in Ruba's arms, Ruba has a much-needed epiphany. Well, this has been a real eye-opener for me. We can't allow the demons to keep doing things like this. Maybe his name should have been Rube. After Colony of Lava, you can teleport back to Lance if you want, to sell another iron ore that was found inside of Burnbless, upgrade armor, and visit your old pals. You'll also discover that Lilia has gone missing, and it probably has something to do with what Dallas was telling his minion earlier about rounding up sacrifices. After this, it's on to Ramia Village, which is the last stop on our pilgrimage to Solomon Shrine. But first, I want to talk about the resourcefulness of East 2's music for a moment. With this game being the final leg of a journey spanning 2 games, the music follows suit. Several areas feature leitmotifs from previous songs that complement each other while also retaining their environmental themes. Lance Village has the pleasant tone that comes with any first town in an RPG. Ramia Village takes that theme and elevates it into loftier synth waves accompanied by an acoustic guitar, reminding you of the same friendly vibes while telling you that you're on a mountain. The pace of this theme gets faster while inside of the subterranean canal of Solomon Shrine, with the guitar once again taking the lead, accompanied by upbeat drums and classical string instruments. The sound informs you that there must be some semblance of civilization lurking in a dark corner, if you can find it. The shop theme, May I Help You, has craft and technical know-how imbued into its spirit. It's a sound that convinces you that some artisan is getting to work with the percussion mimicking the cadence of a workshop hammer. Colony of Lava reverse engineers the shop theme into a noise that's more raw, led by a steel drum and providing a song that can survive the heat of the Earth's mantle, because it was forged in it. It's also accompanied by a punji, which will never not trick me into feeling like I'm in a warm place, but also taming cobras. Bonus points that this theme juxtaposes the cold and fearful demeanor of the colony's villagers when you first arrive. Ruins of Mundoria, Rock Ballad. Enter the inside of those ruins, and that rock ballad turns into something more curiously grim. I'm sure the organs help, but it's more dungeon-esque. And lastly, the Ridge of Noltea leads heavily on the strings, with a nice bass guitar in the background, adding determination to the cold winds coursing through Adol's veins. Walk into a cave, and that beat slows to absolute zero, allowing a xylophone for its first 20 or so seconds, followed by a heavy synth bass that sounds like it was made on the PlayStation's music mode, while adding depth to the bottomless pits you'll see in some of these caves. Ramia Village's harmony is polarizing to its reality. The town has taken the biggest brunt from the recent demon invasion. Houses have incisions left by demon claws, indiscriminate of whether they're made of wood or stone. A girl tells you her father is missing. The village's bulletin board reads, "Keep doors firmly shut. Defense begins with you." Lloyd practically confesses he's been listening to Nas's Illmatic album. There's a rushed graveyard in the corner of town where Keith was pronounced dead. Wait, Keith's dead? What the fuck? The headstones here were made without any bodies in remembrance to the lost villagers. There's an abandoned house with busted windows and the door ajar. It's all pretty grim. At least the shopkeeper's a dime. With the demons holed up in Solomon Shrine, Ramia has been a prime source of sacrificial offerings. The latest victim of all that human theft was a bride-to-be named Maria, who was taken mere days before her wedding. Seeing the hand-woven dress and ceremonial headdress sitting idly next to her forlorn mother hits heavy. As the mother Karen is venting, the toll of a bell can be heard in the distance, signaling another sacrifice is offering, and we, like Karen, all hope it's not Maria whose life will be cut short. I know I just talked about East 2 lacking exciting characters when compared to its prequel earlier, but if there's an exception to this rule, then Ramia is certainly that exception. Gordo the Guard provides some backstory to Sada, Maria's fiancé, who abandoned all fear and took his family heirloom, a legendary sword, to go and search for Maria on a one-man mission with a fairly dire and certain outcome. Gordo also points us to Sada's father, Hadat, whose house contains an open chest, the one Sada opened and took the legendary sword out of, next to another locked chest. I was not expecting to get a character portrait or the music change, but the Slavic infusion for Hadat was a pleasant surprise. I'm half expecting this man to directly tell me what's on his mind over pickled herring and vodka. Sada was on patrol the day the demons abducted Maria, and when she was taken, he gut-reacted on a sliver of hope to try and rescue her. Hadat sends us away with a Lila shell, which will act as a walkie-talkie for the upcoming mission into Solomon Shrine. Having that shell also makes Gordo the Guard let us enter the final dungeon. Of course, we've got to visit the resident sexy shopkeeper to cut through all this town's dismay, as well as prepare. Don't be shy. Feel free to look, touch, and even try on for size. Is this lady selling swords or soapland services? I've got to give Zalem credit here. The sexual undertone in just about every line of her dialogue probably gets weapons sold. To a swordsman, a sword is an extension of the spirit, as much as the body. I'm sure your customers are extending something all right. The last villager in Ramia I'll mention for now is Reg. You can find his house at the town's tallest hill, which has a signpost that reads, Reg's Residence. This guy must be friends with Legman. Like Legs was for the ruins of Moondoria, Reg is sort of what Rabba was to Dharm Tower, but for Solomon Shrine. He was exploring the shrine's ancient secrets before demons started appearing, those 6 months ago. He's not too important for now, but he does have a nice magical well at the bottom of his house to replenish Adol's HP and MP meters. Well, Solomon Shrine is finally here. This dungeon is like the inverse of Dharm Tower with all of the Dharm mechanics baked in and then some. It's not 25 floors of goodness. Instead, we're looking at 4, maybe sometimes 5 total stories. But the surface area is spread out horizontally instead of vertically. Think of it like one big traditional 2D Zelda dungeon. However, you'd be foolish to believe that this won't keep you from getting lost in the Solomon sauce. I'm sure you can guess that this place can and will be, at times, maddening, as you try to figure out where to go or what to do next. A good example of this is the corridor I'm currently traveling through. The 3 exits here will chew your mind up as they spit you out goddess knows where, at significantly different areas spanning across the map. It also doesn't help that the first direction given to Adol was a mistranslation. We're told that a certain Mistress Zava, someone whom we'll eventually be fairly intimate with, give or take a few hours, is located in the shrine's eastern quadrant on the 3rd floor, which is flat out wrong. Our main objective is to find the dungeon's captives, consisting of everyone missing from Ramia, in addition to notable people Adol met along his journey while traveling through East. Of course, this is easier said than done in a place like this. Turning Rue is mandatory to get into Solomon Shrine. Trying to attack the guards out front is a surefire way to restart whenever you last saved. And not for lack of trying. I couldn't put a dent in these guards even if I wanted to, in spite of receiving a hefty upgrade to the weaponry back at Ramia. Because we're a Rue, and we have Adol's armor in our possession, the guards take this to mean that he's been defeated and tell us to go report the good news to Mistress Zava, if we can find her. You know, mistranslation. If you're having trouble with this first task, I won't look down on you for consulting a guide because this place is massive and full of piecemeal objectives. Even Hadat isn't helpful if you try using the Lila shell to call him. I'm sorry to be such a burden, but please, keep an eye out for Sada. It would mean the world to me. What was the point of giving me the magical cell phone if you're not going to be helpful? Throughout the shrine, you'll find checkpoints with demons standing guard, controlling obstacles barring entry to other areas of the dungeon, so you need to find a way past these bridge trolls in order to progress. You'll also be passing places you'll forget that you need to remember to go back to an hour or two later if you want some valuable gear or you want to find late dungeon passages you need to go through to get to the end of it all. Sick. The first goon we have to find is a sultry looking female demon who will share a passport with Adol if spoken to as a Rue. This thing looks like it weighs at least 40 pounds. If I didn't need this as a pass, I'd use it for issuing blunt trauma. The pass acquired, we can get past the first guard who reveals that there's an evil boardroom meeting up ahead in one of the buildings. I'm sure to thank the troll with a quick death to him and his buddies. Each new quadrant of Solomon Shrine is filled with demons that are harder to kill and deal more damage, so you'd be remiss not to grind while getting lost. The game's leveling system is designed in such a way that you'll be leveling up until the very end of Solomon Shrine. Unlike Darm Tower, you can leave Solomon Shrine whenever you need to, in order to get new gear you couldn't afford or restock on consumables, which is nice. Looking at you, Jade's Elixir. The guards will just dumbfoundedly accept that you can somehow teleport out and walk back in. I'm starting to think that Solomon Shrine was a subtle commentary against bureaucracy, with all of these checkpoints and gleaning useful information to cut through the dungeon's red tape. Eventually, we find the demon meeting room, use the whisper earrings to glean some useful intel, and we learn the password needed to get past the next bridge troll. Apparently, most of the sacrifices have escaped, and took the shrine's key with them, and no one knows where they currently are. We use the newly discovered password to gain access to the shrine's western side. Learn that one of the escapees is hiding out, and that we need to report back if we find him. Fat chance on that one. You can find a room over here in the 3rd floor tower, with the same music we heard in the pre-statue rooms, which tells me this place is important, if we don't yet know why. Proactively, I start tinkering with items and magic, and the light magic we first used about 11 hours ago reveals the sacred cup item on the pedestal, which we'll need shortly. After some more trial and error, which are fun synonyms for getting lost and grinding experience, we finally find the entrance to the subterranean canal, in an easily missable room located in the western section of Solomon. And it's here where we first come face to face with Dallas. The villain says that this is Adol's last stop, and to continue no further. And of course, we've got to disobey him. The consequence of this action is that the sorcerer turns us into a dark Rue, which is really just a Rue with a palette swap. You sure stopped us, Dallas. But he actually did, because now we can't turn back into a human. This is supposed to be poetic justice because we've been reducing demons to meat chunks for the past 14 hours. Since we don't have to search for the sacred cup, which will be needed to reverse this transformation, it might feel tempting to go straight to the residence for some assistance. What you'll want to do instead is explore the canal a bit to find the entrance to the runaways' hideout, because doing so will add that location as a teleporting waypoint and removes the hassle of having to backtrack here later on in the game. We won't be able to enter the hideout with the refugees barring their collective weight against the door after seeing a demon. Come on, he's just a black and white Rue. He looks cute, not dangerous. So now it's time to go see Reg. Reg just so happens to speak Demonese, and tells Adol that he needs to fill the sacred cup with his basement water. Which again, is not a sentence you really think about until it leaves your mouth. But now we can teleport back and actually enter the runaways' hideout to see who's waiting behind those closed doors. The people hiding here are people you ran into along your journey, who also had a penchant for exploration. Boats, who was exploring Ristini Mine for mining resources. Lilia, who went lover stalking for Adol. This guy, I actually didn't bother talking to this guy before seeing him here, but I'm sure he's here and it has something to do with him having an adventurous spirit. His name is Kyle. More importantly, he looks like he's over 30. This game came out in 1988, which means Keith would be over the age of 40 by today's standards. So East 2 is officially historically accurate to my lived experiences. You love to see it. It turns out that everyone in Runaway's hideout was saved by Keith, who gave the shrine's master key to Lilia, who then gives it to Adol before Dallas shows up and turns everyone to stone. It's supposed to feel like a punch to the gut, but maybe this is my experience talking. It feels like a missed opportunity for the series to end right here. Dallas could just turn Adol to stone and that would be the end of it. I understand why it happened. It's supposed to demoralize the player. It probably demoralized players back then, but to me, it's a plot hole that's hard to ignore. Master key in hand, we can now open up any locked door we encountered earlier. The first locked door leads us to time magic, which I never really used because doing so saps the fun out of battles for me. It's supposed to help with grinding higher level enemies if you need it. Turning Rue at another previously locked chamber in the western quadrant leads us to an open chest with another sultry demon who says that the goddess's pendant, the item needed to get to the main building of the shrine, has been moved to the west sector of the subterranean canal. but we just scoured the entire west sector of the canal. So thank the Lord for guides. This was yet another mistranslation, and the pendant's true location is actually at the subterranean canal's eastern entrance, which we found near the beginning of the dungeon, but it was waiting behind a locked door. Inside this area are some excellent demons for grinding levels. Draconic gorgons with vestigial wings and gnarly flamethrower spit. If you do enough exploring, you can also find a petrified Sada, who, if you remember, took a legendary sword before entering the shrine, so he'll be important later. Getting to the end of this area yields the Silver Pendant, which will get us to the dungeon's final area. If we can remember where the heck the Gata statue might be. It's near the beginning of the shrine in some area we forgot about a long time ago, so no surprises there. When speaking to the statue, it'll tell you that the Silver Pendant will lead Adol to the Golden Pendant, which will get us to the game's final area. Shortly after warping, we get a call from Hadad on the magic conch, telling us that some boy has urgent news for us, and to warp back to Ramia right away. So, thinking this is probably pretty important, I make my way back to Hadad's and see that the boy he was referring to is none other than Tarf. Knowing his movement speed, it probably took the poor little bastard the last 3 hours I've spent exploring Solomon Shrine just to get here.
Mr. Adol, you're too slow. Come on, hurry it up already.
What a punk. Tarf's urgent news is that Dallas seems like bad news. Oh yeah? Thanks for telling me something I've known since the beginning of the game, Tarf. Like I didn't just watch my comrades get calcified an hour ago. This punk has earned a new title. Tarf the Time Suck. Back at the newly uncovered area of the shrine, a mostly linear path filled with crocodile enemies that also have predator camouflage magic leads to the highly lauded Keith, who I'm excited to finally meet. Keith feels like the Dogi of this game, but he definitely looks like he could be pushing 40 in demon years. Again, historically accurate. Both Dogi and Keith are cool, in their own different ways. Where Dogi was bombastic and charismatic, Keith lays on a thick accent of mystery. His character portrait has a pose that points in the direction of his current objective, only stopping briefly to impart some significant information before disappearing with the wind. Like other great characters in this series, you hear about Keith at least an hour before you meet him, and he has an excellent build-up. He broke out of demon prison with sheer strength provided by the black pearl Adol slipped him earlier. Whether knowingly or otherwise, he abandoned Tarf, which, judging by every encounter we've had with the kid, feels like a strategic decision. Somebody make this guy a middle manager. Keith has been partaking in an ongoing cat and mouse chase with Solomon Shrine's Demon Guard. His presence is Adol's reconnaissance and assistance as much as it is the bane of every creature he resembles. Keith tells us the only way to the goddesses we've been searching for is to get to the goddess's palace, through the area of the canal that he's currently in. In order to proceed, we need to get to the water control room to close the water gates and dam the canal. He gives us the floodgate key, which we then use after entering the once locked Hydra door, back over by Runaway's hideout. This drains all of the canal's water and gives us a reason to retread an already visited area without making it feel like a chore. It's some nifty level design. We get more items like the battle armor and the Falcon idol, which is essentially a more accurate version of the Hawk idol. Both of these off-the-beaten-path items are going to be essential for the impending boss battle in our near future. We find Keith at the exit of the new path that was just created in the canal. He leads with, "It's me, Keith. I know who you are, dude." We met not even 10 minutes ago. But I gotta say, in this moment, at least Keith is getting me somewhere, instead of just making me backtrack for no apparent reason. The guy values my time. This is the entrance to the bell tower, known as the Campanile of Lane, and the sacrificial ritual is beginning. On the 5th toll, the girl, Maria, will die. Zava is lying at the entrance, but I'm not strong enough to fight her. You need to save that poor innocent girl in my place, Adol. Please. We have the opportunity to save Maria, the lost bride, so yeah, I'm down to get her back to that longing wedding dress of hers. This next area is full of the game's toughest scumbags. During my time in Solomon Shrine, I've been grinding whenever possible, and these demons are still doing around 48% of Adol's health bar. If that wasn't enough of a foreboding about the boss of this area. Though, I've got to commend East 2 for keeping a grind loop throughout its entire runtime. Even if that means re-encountering enemies with Yu-Gi-Oh! Intro health bars. I've managed to even use the area's obstacles to strategically wait and heal. These enemies are tough, but it looks like they aren't tougher than a lush water fountain. Ha ha ha! Spoke too soon there. Time to use that magical get out of jail free card. Win low health and in doubt, bust that rue magic out. We eventually make our way over to the goddess's palace. Easily my favorite place to hang out in East 1 and 2, with Ormond's spirits being a close second. The palace is bathed in natural light, as the Viridian pillar growth shows off its age. When you enter this place, you can hear voices singing Fina's theme in the background, which makes me feel like I'm in the presence of an invisible choir, chanting a prayer for Adol's victory over demonkind. The palace comes equipped with a rooftop terrace that lets you overlook Ys and Asteria from the first game, letting us see Mania and Darm Tower peeking through a partly cloudy view. But you can even see Barbato in the back there. It really gives a perspective to Adol's entire journey up until this point. What's more apparent is that this place is the calm before the cataclysm. Adol is greeted by magical projections of the goddesses. They tell him that the magical artifact capable of reversing everyone's petrification is located to the north in a place called the Campanile of Lane. Because boss doors are more ambiguous in East 2, there's like a 1 in 3 chance you'll encounter a treasure, an area to progress through, or a boss after passing through one of these gates with the goddess crest on them. I unwisely enter through this one without saving, and stumble into Mistress Zava.
Son of men, you must be taught your place, and I assure you, the lesson will be a long and painful one.
I'm not taking this seriously. We learn that the sultry yet bureaucratic priestess demons from the early section of Solomon's Shrine were actually Zava's right and left hands. The left hand tells me she's gonna drink my blood and feast on my flesh. Okay? A little gross, but not all that intimidating. But then the right hand says,
"Dance for me. Dance the waltz of death. Dance the lambada of demise."
And my skepticism exits as quickly as it enters my head. Suddenly, the trio sheds their skin suits, and what do you know? The priestess demons are bats. Which should tell you everything you need to know about how this is all going to play out. I pull a hard nope after the big speech due to my health bar not being full, and not remembering when I last saved. Exiting boss fights. What a great feature. After getting all set, I head back in. This boss battle. Where do I even begin? In the fictional relationship that is Bat Dad and Mistress Zava wears the pants and brings home the bread. Excuse me if I go insane trying to recount this ordeal. First things first, you can't attack Zava until her bat minions are destroyed. The bats are the worst boss enemies to try and hit using magic, which is a technique that's been beaten over Adol's head for the past 4 bosses. So I hope you're ready to embrace the wall punching frustration and some broken wrists, because you're not Dogi. These jerks, that's about the most politely vague word for them, true to the canonically nightmarish nature of bats in the world of Ys, are a ruler to the knuckles in the 1960s, because the nun notices that you're left-handed. Keith knows what I'm talking about. You're all like, why'd you do that? And she's spouting off about how the Latin word for left is the term sinister, and that's where we get the word left from, but it also means evil or threatening, so she needs to exorcise the demons out of your pinstrokes? Yes, fighting this battle is like trying to teach yourself, a lefty, how to write with your right hand, and still getting ink smudges all over your palm, in addition to reinventing the wheel on how your brain functions. Yes, I live in a world created by right-handed people. Statistically speaking, only 10% of you will understand that joke, but those are about the best odds I've had on most of my jokes, so I'll take them. Heck it, we ball. Both of these bats will hone in on or near Adol's last recorded position. Think about this like Interview with a Vampire, except the vampires are asking all the questions, and the questions happen to be shaped like neon bullets. Sometimes the bats will flurry energy balls at you, sometimes they won't. You've got better odds predicting a coin flip. Hitting the bats with Adol's fireballs will cause them to spin, sometimes shooting another energy barrage at you. Furthermore, if you're able to hit a bat after finessing a direct line of fire, that bat will spin out of control and sometimes out of sight, causing Adol to miss out on any additional damage, and leaving you in a state of dreaded confusion about whether you're going to run out of mana or patience first. Without the Falcon Idol, this boss fight is more frustrating than the first hour of Dark Fact on a 144Hz monitor. Zava will typically absorb your fireballs if she's too close because they're programmed to attack the nearest enemy when the Falcon Idol is equipped. But compared to not having the Falcon Idol, this is a small price to pay for not being able to kill the bat minions. Zava is a boss you don't want to frolic around with. You also want to have 2 herbs equipped for reasons that will be made evident shortly. As in, the sentence following this one. If you're not at a high enough level, it will take what feels like 10 minutes to get the bats to start glowing red, which is a visual cue that they're about to turn into lost boys in the sunlight. What's that? 0 lost boys died from sunlight? None? Well, back to that Interview with the Vampire reference. So the bats blink red faster and faster, until interview. And when they die, well, congratulations.
Now there's 3 of them. And I hope you didn't burn through all of your herbs because that entire ordeal took almost half of your MP bar. If the phrase batshit crazy were ever invented by a video game series, I'm convinced that series was Ys. Just like when we fought Bat Dad, we accept that we have to train up if we want to beat this thing. But instead of an equipment boon, this time the deficit is in magic attack power, coming from Adol being underleveled. I need to blow off some steam anyway. The silver lining, no pun intended, is that taking a break to grind experience allowed me to notice that I was missing the battle sword, which made the grinding a lot less Yu-Gi-Oh! Intro for me. And with a break, comes a little R&R over at the Goddess's Palace. After gaining 2 more levels, I returned to the planescape of torment that is the Zava boss battle, ready for vengeance. Those 2 levels make all the difference. Adol's magic output feels a lot more powerful because of it, and victory now feels achievable. Alright, I've got this. 2 bats down and onto the expectant respawn trio, but with a lot more damage coming from Adol this time. The 3 bats go from full to low health in less than 2 minutes. Back to 2 bats, now just 1, and a bat quartet spawns. Kill me now. Zava might actually be the Shadow Puppet Master final boss of Ys 2, and I'm gonna need some baby aspirin to prevent the isked emic stroke you suck isked I'm about to have, because I haven't gotten to her part of the battle at about an hour and a half into the battle at this point. When you finally kill all of the respawning butts, sorry, Freudian slip, Zava enters the arena in all of her cybernetic, Power Rangers villain looking, Ursula legs, Ashura arms glory. And after making me write a sentence like that, I think that the monster design team deserves the utmost of props. Pending that you're alive longer than 12 seconds, not burning your herbs on the bats comes in clutch here, you'll be able to experience that Zava has no qualms with cheaply killing you with her bullet hell maelstrom. You'll also notice that yes, another bat is here to play the role of a mosquito with the combined disease vectors of malaria, West Nile virus, Zika, and dengue fever. With the Falcon Idol equipped, killing the last bat is imperative. If you don't, your magic attacks will not focus on Zava like you need them to. With the last bat out of the way, you pause the game. You say a prayer, "Dear Lord, please." Take a few breaths. It's gonna be okay. You dance around the bullets, and you damage her as much as you can, when you can. To say the least, this was a waltz of death. A lambada of demise, if you will. Maybe the death and demise belong to Adol for the first 2 hours, but what matters is the end result. And dear God, man, save your game. Past Zava's boss room, we hear the ominous bell ring at the top of the campanile. The music turns dire on a dime. That's the sound of impending sacrifice. Up ahead on an altar surrounded by a moat of bottomless pit lies Maria, who is shackled. With the bell issuing its first toll, we know the situation isn't great right now. Stay away! There's no reason for you to die as well. There's no way for you to save me. Please, you must flee from this place. Get away while you can. Surrender be darned. We're gonna try anyway. Whoever planned this scenario in the game did a great job. The focus is to save Maria, and the music does an excellent job of raising the stakes in an area that's void of enemies, as the bell's 5 chimes are strategically placed to give the player a sense of urgency toward this aim. The campanile performs little tricks to try and distract you, like placing a treasure chest you can't open because it's blocked by a barrier of green flames, or, for a more sightseeing player like myself, a nice expanse of hysteria I shouldn't be taking in right now. As Adol makes his way to the top of the campanile, the bell tolled for a 4th time. Only 1 remained.
Dallas awaits us at the summit, primed to throw salt into Adol's already gaping mental wound.
Dallas explains that the descendants of the priests from 700 years ago are still alive to this day. Go figure. And that the intent of indiscriminately capturing sacrifices and slaughtering them was to smother the flame of anyone who was capable of standing up to the mysterious evil resurging in the land. Now, the bell has tolled 4 times. He really sounds like Xemnas from Kingdom Hearts 2. And this last shall be the sweetest. The bell atop the tower rang for the 5th and final time, cutting the stillness of the air. The sky turns heaven-shattering red as it gives way to lightning. All you can do is reflect upon your own inadequacies, your utter powerlessness. Dallas teleports out. On the way back down, the treasure is no longer surrounded by flames, so we can open it and obtain the Dreaming Idol. Before exiting, we witness the consequences of Dallas's latest ritual. Maria lays motionless on the altar, with a loose bracelet for company. After returning the Dreaming Idol to the goddess's magical projections, They tell Adol that he needs to combine it with the Black Pearl and return in order to save everyone at the hideout. I realize that this is when we're probably supposed to go and visit Tarf, since he was the last person who knew something about the Black Pearl. And here, I've got to give the developers some credit for making Tarf memorable, even if it was for the wrong reason. When I think about it, it feels intentional that you're supposed to be annoyed by Tarf, if not slightly frustrated with him at this point in the game. Tarf has the Black Pearl, or at least he was supposed to. There's a hole in my pocket? To that I ask, how dare you? I usually don't have ire in my heart for children in video games, unless it's a Bethesda game. But with Tarf, it's like, Mr. Adol, you're too slow. Come on, hurry it up already. I hope he steps on a Lego. He's malnourished when you first meet him, so you can excuse the literal feet dragging when you have to escort him through Burned Bless. But the needless beeper page while we were in Solomon's Shrine strikes a nerve for certain. Tarf gaslights Adol about being slow, and then trolls him with useless information about the Dark Wizard who just turned everyone in Runaway's hideout into Roman estate decorations. But this ire and frustration clandestinely solidifies the disdain into your brain for the little guy. After revisiting Hadat's, his house suddenly finds itself on the short list of places to never visit again, because Tarf specifically only feels like he's there to waste time and troll Adol. But I liken it to when you see a character in a movie or TV show that you can't stand. You're like, what are you doing? The JFK Marilyn Monroe song for your boss, who you're also cooking the books for? That's acceptable, but the husband who's dying from cancer and making meth to provide for his family isn't? And you realize that the actor or actress is doing their job correctly. They're playing their part so well it leaves an impression. That's the design role Tarf takes on right now. And I think it's excellent this game can make your personal gripes with their innocent trickster guide you along its intended path. Tarf says that he had the Black Pearl when near Gordo, so Gordo might know more. Gordo says he saw a man in a black cape take the pearl, which leads us back to Dumb and Dumber, who now announced that the demon meeting from earlier has concluded. So we go back to the boardroom, where we find the Black Pearl, and then it's back to the goddess's palace to merge the idol with the pearl. And then all the way back up to the top of the Campanile to depetrify everyone. Teleporting back to the hideout shows us that the denizens are back to normal, but Lilia, once again, is missing. After speaking with everyone at the hideout, Keith shows up and does what he does best. He throws a wing onto the ground for everyone to return to civilization and dips, continuing on his one demon mission to stir the pot that is Solomon's Shrine. He's so cool. Before leaving, Boats tells Adol to find Lilia and gives us the golden pendant, so we can make it to the end of the game. But, if you recall, we should get back to a newly unpetrified Sada, who has the family heirloom blade we heard about back in Ramia. After revealing Maria's fate, Sada mourns the loss of his fiancé, thanks Adol for giving it the old college try, and gives us the Claria sword, this game's version of the Silver Sword. Sada then tells us that the Claria armor is inside of the locked chest that we couldn't open earlier inside of Hadat's home, so we know where we're headed next before finishing Solomon's Shrine. Once Hadat is caught up to speed on all of this, he gives Adol the Claria armor to complete our legendary loadout, and now it's time to beat this game. But first, a farewell tour. This game's best armor in tow, we can finally kill the demons guarding Solomon's Shrine. So that's nice. But what's really great is that each time you kill one of them, they get replaced by their son, which is hilarious. Gatekeeper 5 PI and Gatekeeper 007 are my favorites of the bunch. Seeing as now we've broken the bank in this game, it's time to head back to Lance Village for Jade's 60,000 gold elixir, just in case the final boss gives us some trouble. Lance is also bathed in twilight to communicate a passage of time. Elder Cornell tells us that it looks like Ys seems to be gradually sinking back to the surface from whence it came. We also go to Colony of Lava for some new dialogue. Talking to Iskht again reveals that, like a confrontational yet level-headed stranger on the internet, his edgy facade disappears after learning about who Adol is, ultimately giving his character some redemption. I was a kid once. I too pretended to hate to fit in. It's a surprisingly satisfying arc for the lad. Back at Ramia, we chat with Kyle and discover that he's a single father in addition to being over 30, which is just historically accurate to his name.
If you want to shed a single tear, you can recount Maria's death over at Karen's house. And if you want to experience a satisfying climax to her dialogue, you can visit Zalem over at her shop while adorning the new armor.
Please, may I touch it? I just want to hold it in my hands.
What a minx. Using the gold pendant at the goddess statue takes us to an unscathed section of the subterranean canal that leads to the chamber we saw at the beginning of the game where Dallas was plotting with the Wall Brooch. And it's
right here and right now, where Adal is bestowed a nickname that will follow him throughout the rest of his journeys, Adal the Red. Pretty cool. That's Dallas's most valuable contribution, because I beat him on the first try. I do like that you actually have to use the blade while fighting him, given that the game conditioned us to use nothing but magic for everything leading up to this. Dallas defeated, we go through the wall brooch, and the sinister music from the beginning of the game returns. It's here we find the last magic spell as well. Priest Fax, shield magic. And it's probably helpful, but I'll never use it. Adal takes a funicular deeper into the demonic core, and it's here where we run into a bunch of familiar faces. Tarf has somehow made it down here before Adal, which is pretty baffling, but also everyone else with a character portrait is down here. It's explained later, but you can discern that all of these people are in fact descendants of the priests from 700 years ago. So Tarf, Gordo, and Lilia are all shown. Keith is here, and it's looking like he was a descendant of Priest Fact, which makes sense given his demonic appearance. Maria is also down here. She was saved by that bracelet that was lying next to her when the sacrificial ritual took place. Lilia gives us the goddess ring to get past a barrier, and the next room should look familiar. But I'd forgive you if you didn't notice it because the room has had a palette swap since the first Ys. This is the room where Adal fought Bat Dad. And there's an open chest here, the same open chest from the first Ys, which should be a big hint as far as what's about to happen next. We go back to the next room, which was also from the last game, with the pedestals that were missing the goddess statues on them, only to find Rhea and Fina on those same pedestals they were petrified on for all of those centuries, which was also discussed by some of the villagers in Zepik. The twin goddesses seem to be deadlocked in place, bound by a curse, and the voice behind the wall brooch begins to speak. We can finally associate the name Darm with a face? A spirit, an entity. While we don't really know Darm's origin, he's been magically filed away for the last 700 years, and Rhea and Fina were responsible. Darm's accumulated a lot of resentment over this. And so, with the help of Dark Fact, he's reinitiated his demon invasion that he planned all those centuries ago, as he aspires to teach humanity about the true meaning of terror. I don't think so, demon! A voice calls as the background music polarizes from despair to Dogi, and two figures walk through the room's entrance. That voice belongs to Goban, who is followed by Luda Gemma, and the two are introduced for the first time in Ys 2, accompanied by an amazing rock ballad. Ys is now back where it belongs, and the priests are in attendance. Or did you forget that I'm a descendant of Tova? I'm grinning from ear to ear while experiencing this. I yop, Goban! And Luda Gemma! Yes, I did forget that you were a descendant of a priest, Goban. Couldn't shake the fact that your mom's strawberry shortcake is still alive, so it made more sense for her to be the descendant with poor Sarah no longer with us. Seeing Goban and Luda Gemma return is like seeing two good friends you lost touch with for some time. Reality and circumstance have no hold over friendships like these, and you can pick up immediately where you left off. I'm sorry to be so late at all. Quickly, play the silver harmonica. Its sound will remove the curse on the goddesses. Goban chucks the silver harmonica as deftly as Adal catches it, and it's so cool. Luda Gemma tells us, Adal, where have you been? It's me, Luda Gemma. Yes, you accident-prone goofball. I know who you are, and I love that you announce your full name every time, despite being the only Gemma in these two games. I brought you the Claria shield. I think you'll need it in the coming fight. Say what you will about the man. Luda Gemma always comes in clutch. We play the silver harmonica, and the goddesses are now freed. Adal learns from Rhea that the presence of the demons had to do with the rediscovery of the ancient metal Claria. Like yin and yang, demons were an equal reaction to the presence of Claria. Hundreds of years passed peacefully until Claria was excavated by the people of Asteria and misidentified as silver. So that explains why Rhea called it Claria back in Darm Tower, because she remembered its ancient name while everyone else forgot. Claria is what caused the storm wall and demons spawning out of control around Asteria 6 months previous to Ys 1. With the Claria came an amplification of magical energy that was strong enough to give Dark Fact the edge needed to break Darm's seal. We learn that Dark Fact, just like the other priests encountered throughout both games, was the descendant of the Fact bloodline, which you can kind of discern from the beginning of Ys 2 unless you're blinded by the opinion that Dark Fact is a rad name. While the ontology is ambiguous at best, it's enough of a general explanation to accept as far as why chaos broke out in Asteria. Rhea tells Adal that wearing her ring during the fight with the final boss will weaken him, similar to how the silver equipment worked in the first game. Adal gets a brief moment with Fina, who apologizes for not spilling the beans about her deity status back in Asteria.
She also states that beyond the sealed door lies the true Black Pearl, which is the source of both magic and demon kind. This is where Dharm awaits us for the final battle. Adol receives one last power-up and enters a long hallway, filled with magical, dilapidated plexiglass platforms, as he runs to a teleporter that will take him to Dharm's arena, which is surrounded by an ocean of primeval in the visible horizon. Pretty sublime. Dharm gives a short final battle speech about merging with the Black Pearl and how he's going to consume Adol's soul. We shall know true despair, whatever, Zava's speech was better, let's get this over with. Instead of a rectangular pattern that disappears every time you hit the boss, this battle takes place on a circular arena. All in all, this fight is fairly easygoing and is more spectacle than challenge, especially with Jade's elixir in tow. Dharm has 2 full health bars. He sends out 5 dark fire orbs. One of those orbs throws a bunch of lasers that fire and disperse lazily, causing you to have to weave in and out as the dark fire orbs hone in on Adol's position and leave fiery pillars in their wake. Just past the midway point on Dharm's health bar, he sheds his mortal coil, and we have a fight with the Black Pearl itself, which Dharm has taken full possession of. The Phase 2 boss looks like a biblically accurate depiction of an angel. Instead of dark fire orbs, 5 streams of Gatling lasers fire off in 5 separate directions, where the Black Pearl is facing. And, seeing as he doesn't have a face, the area of attack ends up being the last direction Adol was when the Black Pearl was in its power charging phase. The lazy blue lasers also make a return, and now the Black Pearl vomits hyper beams. It certainly took me a few tries to get the hang of things, and having Jade's elixir certainly made it easier. We defeat Dharm, and whoever made the Steam achievements must have been on the same cloud as me. Darn it, indeed, nameless friend. The consequences of this battle are immediate, as all of Adol's magical power begins to leave him, and the scene fades to white. Adol finds himself on the balcony of the goddess's palace, greeted by a sea of smiling faces, and you could not find a more whimsical epilogue theme. In rare form, Tarf jumps in first. You did it, man! And guess what? Turns out I'm a descendant of one of the 6 priests myself. May the goddesses have mercy on your lineage, Tarf. Maria and Gordo chime in about being routinely hunted to prevent this good ending from happening, as well as about how they received visions of the goddesses in their dreams. With the wellspring of magic no longer flowing and his curse removed, Keith is now a human. Keith doesn't look like he's over 40 in this game, but if you age him out to today, he is. And so, my Keith and Kyle theory holds true. More importantly, the fact bloodline existed both high up in Ys and on the surface of Asteria, proving that their bloodline isn't completely irredeemable. That's something to keep in mind for a future entry. Keith, inspired by his sister Marley, or is it Marl? Anyone here ever play Chrono Trigger? Whom the Marley flowers share the same name, sheds light on how demons are more of a force that compels pity rather than contempt. Demons are the byproduct of magic, but they can only know destruction instead of creation because the Black Pearl contained the bottomless well of evil intent that was Dharm. Goban tells us that Dogi's really eager to see us, and you know the feeling is mutual. There's a nice outro movie that will show additional scenes depending on any extra content performed in the game, but as far as I know, I got the generic one. Sada and Maria finally reunite and are going to get married. Gordo tells Reg that he can explore Solomon's Shrine, who immediately rolls Cole as if he didn't need a walking cane to go back and geek out over ancient architecture. Keith discovers his own grave and is understandably confused. Tarf and Ruba link back up, and Tarf wants food. Lilia and Karen reunite, and we finally get to see Dogi dancing in the background. The guy doesn't miss. The last bit of dialogue exchanged is with Fina, as Rhea leaves her alone with Adol, and Lilia reluctantly gets cast aside to kick rocks and swoon over our hero in solitude. Fina all but confesses her love for our hero, as she thanks him for making her feel like a woman rather than a glorified deity, and says she hopes that Adol will always remember her. The twin goddesses need to go back to their cave and safeguard the Black Pearl, so Dharm can never return back to the land. On one hand, it sucks seeing my beloved on her way back to being repetrified forever after spending an entire game chasing after her. But on the other hand, it's probably for the best. Following Ys 2's release in 1988, Falcom experienced a mass exodus of talent, lasting until 1990. Due to licensing conflicts with the publisher involving his compositions, Yuzo Koshiro and his graphic designer sister were the first to go. 2 years later, they formed their own gaming company called Ancient. 1989 saw the release of Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys, a 2D action-adventure game following the side-scroller trends of the time. During its development, this was supposed to be a separate game not involved with the Ys franchise. but then management told Masaya Hashimoto and Tomoyoshi Miyazaki to make it a non-numbered Gaiden entry, or side adventure. However, at the 11th hour, the two were told by management that this would be labeled as the third numbered Ys game, probably to try and sell more copies. Whether it was due to their creative child getting pushed aside for the sake of Masayuki Kato's greed, or seeing the forest for the trees on how Falcom was going to continue its game development, the minds behind Ys had had enough. Hashimoto and Miyazaki departed from Falcom and would soon form as the new developer, Quintet, with Enix as their publisher, and while we might be better for it, the Ys series would encounter at least a decade of mishaps, only returning to its former glory with Ys 6 in 2003. It was a cruel fate for a series that came out of the gate enchanting, but luckily, some brilliant minds were able to save it from damnation and correct Ys's course toward where it is today. If you're going to play any other version of the first two Ys games, I'd recommend the TurboGrafx 16 duology, which was developed by Hudson Software. That version, while a bit structurally different in both narrative and gameplay, boasted nearly 5 times as many on-screen colors as the Super Famicom, but it also included voice acting. Notably, Goban is voiced by a younger Thomas Hayden Church.
You are really as brave as they say you are, then the entrance to the tower is at the back of this house. Good luck. You'll need it.
Who you might know as Sandman from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, while I admire him from the movie Sideways.
Wow.
His acting, not his character. There's other decent voice acting from most of each game's main cast here as well. Tarf is practically inaudible here over the loud music, which is really just what you'd expect from him. I think the TurboGrafx duology also has cooler intros than Chronicles Plus, given the constraints placed on the TurboGrafx. It's neat to see the polish added to these games only a year after Ys 2's original release. Among other details, Dallas's design looks more metal in this version, where he's depicted as an undead spellcaster instead of a pretty man. And if you feel so inclined, there's an Ys anime that debuted after the first two games came out that you can find on YouTube. I'll link what I can find in the description. It goes pretty hard and it's worth checking out. It even includes Velagunder as a shady priest misguiding Lance Village. Just look at his face melt from Adol's Righteousness. Hardcore. Having played Ys 1 and 2, it's no secret to me how influential these games would have been back in the day. There's a lot of innovation and design magic in this duology that can be felt in action RPGs even today. There's at least 5 big conventions that you could find in several Zelda games alone, from minor design choices like adding goofy, memorable NPCs, to bigger story themes. The hero requiring the aid of 6 sages to defeat evil happened in Ys 2, well before A Link to the Past utilized it as a motif in several games, after its release on the Super Nintendo. The first Ys had you embarking on a quest to acquire its legendary weapon in a less complex manner, similar to acquiring the Big Goron sword in Ocarina of Time. Goddesses involved in the plot? Check. An ancient civilization that was cascaded into the clouds to save it from demons? 23 years too late, Skyward Sword. And hate it or love it, Ys is one of the earliest examples of the escort mission in an RPG that I can find. So even a great like Eco nods its game design toward a series like Ys. When comparing both games in the duology, I definitely preferred the first game more. Maybe it was the novelty factor, but the progression of the first game, its underlying mystery, dungeon progression, the deviations from the main quest that didn't feel like deviations, and the big cliffhanger ending were a perfect synthesis between narrative and mechanics for me. Ys 2 is still a good game. It's a nice tinsel-laced ribbon wrapped neatly around Ys 1, capitalizing upon conventions from the first game that worked, while innovating new conventions, such as establishing a magic system, doubling the game's dialogue with use of alter magic, or even keeping the player extra informed or given little side tasks they could do with the use of each bulletin board in a town. For a game made in the 80s, with a medium like the CD-ROM that was well ahead of its time, at the time, it's pretty amazing. Ys 2 happens to rely heavily on its spectacle while running the player through a mostly linear main quest, which just wasn't as exciting for me. Despite all of that, both games are complementary to each other, so they're worth considering as a whole, even if, when separated, they stand out for different reasons. Ys 2 is a game that aspired to be more than its predecessor, and that deserves acknowledgement. Additionally, both of these games were made by a crew whose average age was under 25. Like most of the ways that you can find Ys 1 and 2, they should definitely be considered as a whole experience that lays an excellent foundation for the almost 40 years the series has endured beyond them, and you shouldn't sleep on experiencing what they have to offer, if only to see how a long-standing series earned its wings. Hey you! Thanks for watching the video if you made it this far. A big shout out to Bowl of Lentils for providing a lot of the legwork on the research performed for this video. The biggest issue I faced was, at least with some of the digging of the research, was that there aren't that many first-hand accounts from people that worked at Falcom back in the 80s, because a lot of times, you know, with a lot of them being younger, they weren't allowed to do interviews. So like Falcom wouldn't let them. But Bowl of Lentils definitely went in hard with a video that they made at least a year back. So I'll definitely link that video in this video's description. So be sure to check that out. This is a good time to let you know that the Patreon is now up and running. It's live, and it's got over 100 hours worth of content if you want to check that out. But any support you can throw my way is greatly appreciated. I would love to do this full time if I could. And any support that you can provide will help me achieve that goal. You are greatly appreciated. I hope you're doing well. And I hope to see you sooner than a year from now. Take care.